Talking about veganism, how do you define veganism? Do you agree with the definition that the vegan society offers?
Oh, I don't like it too much, although it kind of covers everything in a fairly moderate sense. I always go back to the people who started the vegan social movement, and I always also have the caveat that I'm not saying that these are the first people to either eat plant-based or to care about other animals, but they were, as far as we know, the only people, the first people to come together to actually deliberately make a social movement.
Hmm.
And they also named it. They named it veganism, and so they stand out for that reason alone, really. Um, so I go back to some of the things that they said. For example, that it's about the opposition to the exploitation of sentient life. That was said in 1945. So it was an expansive, justice-based idea, and I think the way to get your head around that, if you like, is to remember when it was formed. It was formed in the last years of the so-called Second World War, right? So this global conflict was still happening. And so they saw veganism as part of the peace movement. They saw it as part of nonviolence. They even used phrases like peace aims. And so I summarize it really as a justice for all movement. They thought that veganism was part of the moral evolution of humanity. They thought that see, another thing we've really got to do, even my generation who wasn't in the war, and certainly yours, Seb, is the fact that they lived through 2 world wars, these people. And Donald Watson said it was an absolute shattering experience. He was a conscientious objector. He refused to fight. He said he wouldn't kill anyone, whether they were human or not. And so he was punished for that, as they were in those days, But it was right there. They were learning about the Holocaust. Still yet to find out about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ironically, but they were learning about things like the Holocaust, and this news for them right there on the spot, happening right there, was a real shock to them. Now, for us, it's just something that you read in books and see in movies even.
Yeah.
Right? And so I don't think we understand the visceral nature of what it was like. And so they did really see veganism as getting us out of a moral trough.
All right.
And they said time and time again, Watson said that veganism was the only movement that can save humanity. They made massive claims like that. Kathleen Janaway, one of the pioneers, she said that if we can solve the problem of veganism, it will solve the problem of poverty and war. They thought about veganism as a really massive idea.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has gone now from the movement, that this kind of huge kind of idea that if vegan values came in, it would be absolutely amazing world. Watson said that if the vegan ideal came in, it would be the biggest peaceful revolution in the history of humanity. That's the kind of claims they made about it,
That's really, I mean, yeah, it's powerful. And I do think that if we want to really get rid of all discrimination, exploitation, then we should start at the root, which is, in my opinion, speciesism, because it's one of the first, if not the first type of discrimination that you learn, the idea that this individual looks different or thinks different, therefore you have a certain right over them. I mean, that's the
Yes.
basis of discrimination.
Yeah, I agree with that.
There's a growing concern that the original philosophy may be slowly being diluted, if not completely lost, in order to make way for a new one which is far more welfarist in nature, where abolition is replaced with the reduction of suffering and improving the lives of those who will still only exist to be used or taken from. And those original values were never intended to be diluted or reduced. The idea of campaigning for better standards and more efficient forms of exploitation in the likes of welfare groups and legislation is essentially not only a complete lack of respect for our foundations, but more importantly for the victims that those foundations were set up to liberate, not continue to use in a nicer environment. Yet worryingly, that seems to be an ever-growing view within the collective. Simply through the use of their language they use or the media they share, this reducitarian paradigm is sweeping in.
The question I ask myself is, if I can live in a way that reduces animal suffering, why wouldn't I?
Asking others to be as vegan as possible is also beneficial because it asks for reduction, which people are more receptive to than they are to full veganism.
It's a relatively young movement. It's about food.
I mean, there can be, like I said, a give and take, and that is what I call a symbiosis.
I want to create a world which is more ethical and reduces animal suffering as far as is possible.
I use the phrasing reduce suffering, and I guess that is the principle I align with more.
I think that people are so concerned about suffering that they tend to lead activism into a welfare position.
But can we please stop reducing veganism to a welfare movement where all we talk about is animal cruelty? We're not campaigning for comfier cages, and every time we talk about just cruelty, that's where people's heads go.
Okay, so that's the kind of opening to it. And
Yes.
It seems, because one thing that is pretty clear now is that cruelty is the dominant word within the movement right now.
Yes.
Closely followed by abuse, an abuser. And so you know, it's kind of interesting in the sense that even if you think about the official vegan definition, where it says exploitation of and cruelty to, so cruelty is in that as well.
Yes. Yes.
It is the second word,
Yes.
not the first. Advocates will often reverse them. And Andy pointed out that you know, there was some streams when people are actually physically reading out the definition, and they still reverse it, even though it's right there in front of them, as it were, because of this kind of dominance of the word. And as I said, I think then it's caused confusion, and I think this is why the modern day advocates often rail against an organization like the RSPCA. But the irony there is the RSPCA are more in tune with the cultural understanding of those words than vegans are. And so there's a heck of a lot of work to do if you want to redefine these long-standing understandings, which we're socialized into them. You know, cultural speciesism, a big part of that is animal welfare ideology. And so even things like, for example, you know, teaching kids, you know, don't be cruel. So whether it's the new puppy in the house, or whether we're talking about pulling wings off flies and killing spiders, then often parents will say to children, don't be cruel, you know, but that's got nothing to do with veganism. And so this kind of link that vegans are trying to establish, we're going to have to accept that if we want to do that as a strategy, we've got a heck of a lot of work to do, which is, you know, certainly not going to be done by calling people abusers as soon as they get confused by what we're saying.
No.
And then in terms of welfare, I always point out, you know, Ed's book here, where he kind of talks about the red tractor and the paradox of the RSPCA. He mainly talks about these welfare issues and says, well, the red tractor is not working. Well, from an animal rights point of view, it wouldn't matter if it worked or not. He was on the TV arguing with a slaughterhouse owner the percentage of times that the stunning was done properly. From the animal rights point of view, it doesn't matter. And then he put like a cartoon out about this issue that he talks about in, of all things, a TED talk.
Survey conducted by the British Cattle Veterinary Association, and it revealed that every single year 150,000 cows are sent to the slaughterhouse while pregnant. It went on to show that 40,000 of these pregnant dairy cows are in the late stages of pregnancy, meaning that the baby inside of them could well be capable of independent life. Now, there are no real legal guidelines to protect unborn calves, but the RSPCA which is Britain's leading welfare organisation, has a set of guidelines that it advises slaughterhouses should follow in the event of a pregnant cow being sent to their slaughterhouse. And the guidelines are as follows. It says that the cow should be killed in the same way as she would normally, which is a bolt in.
Yeah, so I'm just going to stop that and say this gets a little bit graphic, but not too bad.
The head to stun her before she's hung up on the line and has a knife pulled across her throat so that she bleeds to death. However, they then state that the cow should be left on the bleeding line for at least 5 minutes to ensure that the baby inside of her has time to die as well. And so often, what can happen is the mother cow will be cut open and the baby inside of her is still alive, breathing, conscious. And so the RSPCA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, states that the humane way to kill a baby who has just been cut out of their dead mother is to shoot them with a bolt or hit them over the head with a blunt instrument. Their first and last experiences of life are on the floor of a slaughterhouse.
This is from the blurb, this bit here, which is really interesting. So this is the blurb of the video. If you care about animals or consider yourself an animal lover, you owe it to the animals and yourself to go vegan. So that's where they're making this connection between animal welfare, being an animal lover, straight to veganism, which culturally is kind of incoherent. And then for more information on how to reduce the animal cruelty, the thing that Andy highlighted in the film, you pay for and to go vegan, go to howtogovegan.com, which probably the person who organizes howtogovegan.com would be probably mortified if they knew that Earthling Ed was using their website to promote his kind of like version of welfare veganism. But when he says the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, as though that's meaningful from an animal rights point of view, it's not.
No, because it was never meant to cover the cases that he kind of claims should be included within it. It was about like the kind of more extreme end of the ill treatment of other animals.
And also a selective group of other animals too.
Yeah, and more to do with animals like dogs and cats and those animals, animals that people consider as pets in inverted commas.
Okay, so the way that this is getting constructed in the modern times, I'm going to show you a couple of very brief clips of street work that has been done by Cliff Grant in Belfast, Northern Ireland. This is where you get this situation that as soon as people don't agree with the vegan definition of things, they're an abuser.
It's an animal abuse. Like,
what do you think?
Why is it? I'm completely against any form of animal abuse.
Are you sure about that? Because 99% of people in this street tell me the same thing, and then they turn around and justify it after like a couple of questions. So I normally ask people.
You're challenging me already.
I am. in a friendly way, but in a friendly way. Yeah. I normally ask people
and I've been a vegan. No, I'm not a vegan anymore. No,
see, there you go.
I don't agree with.
But you told me you're against animal abuse, and then you're not vegan. That's why I'm here.
Right, to turn.
So how can you be against animal abuse and not be vegan? How does that make any sense?
Oh well, then obviously I'm for animal abuse. Okay.
You are, obviously. Yeah. Well, you fund it.
Right, and so it seems to me that once you get to that difficult area, that's when you need to talk about culture, and you need to say, well, look, I understand that we're now talking about these words in a different way. Let's talk about that, right? So to actually just go for, well, you're an abuser at that stage seems to me not to have much of an educational component to it. Another thing about it, Ronnie, is it's very popular. They get some lots of views and also lots of comments. I just switched to this for a second. These are some of the comments. First of all, there's a comment from non-vegan. Eating other animals is not abuse. It's called being part of the food chain. So again, that person is articulating the cultural understanding of that word, right? Which is not the vegan understanding of that word. And then somebody said, in theory, she's against animal abuse, but in practice, she endorses and supports it by being non-vegan. Now,
That bit is putting together two elements which culturally don't fit, because everybody is against animal abuse. You go down your street and ask people, are you against animal abuse? Or ask them, are you against animal cruelty? And you can guarantee virtually everyone will say yes, right? Which is exactly what they do when Cliff asks them that question. And then he switches to slaughterhouses. And that's when they get confused, because those words have got nothing to do with slaughterhouses and veganism. It's at that point that we need to be able to have a conversation where we explore the confusion between the two definitions, the kind of traditional cultural one, if you like, and the definition that the vegans are trying to, they're trying to redefine it. This is the answer to that top question there. Eating other animals is not abuse. The response is usually this: stabbing animals in the neck is not abuse, right? And so, question mark. Okay, and so this is the attempt to redefine, but there's no discussion. We've got this construction now in the vegan community that there's a direct link between these welfare words, which are essentially RSPCA type words, and veganism. If you try and make this case, just as is made on the street, you run smack bang into the wall of cultural speciesism every single time, because people don't know. Suddenly they're on board with you, and then suddenly they don't know what you're talking about. And you don't explain the switch. You just use it to then say you're an abuser. The question for you, Ronnie, is that is very popular in the movement, but it doesn't seem to be much to do with education to me, but it's to do with clicks and, a lot of comments, things like, oh, you showed her, you exposed that person's hypocrisy, all that kind of stuff. That nobody's ever saying, some people say when they get home, they're going to think about it and say, oh, I'm a hypocrite and everything.
I think it's a sort of combative style, isn't it?
But that's holding them to account. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I've had cases where I've been discussing veganism with someone and they've not agreed, and then sometime later I've spoken to them again. They become vegan. It's because I didn't hold them to account, and so because they didn't go away from the conversation disliking me, it meant that they were able to carry on thinking about what I said afterwards. And when they later on thought more about what I said, they came to the conclusion that I was actually right, and they became vegan. Now, if you create a situation where somebody dislikes you, if you accuse somebody of being an abuser and that kind of thing, they're very unlikely to do that. A wall is going to be put up between you and them, and they're much less likely to rethink what you said. And in fact,
I agree with that.
Yeah. In fact, in that conversation, kind of nothing was said about the reasons for being vegan.
Yeah, I've read Tom Reagan. I mean, one of the most interesting things about the animal rights movement is that most people who claim to be animal rights activists are not, because they don't believe in animal rights, because they're doing this for utilitarian grounds. They've read Peter Singer. They think it's about, minimizing suffering. That's not what rights are. Like, to have a right to something means you have an inviolable, impenetrable claim.
It's never surprising when you get pushback on the idea of animal rights, but animal rights is quite a modest idea. So it's not about the same rights. It's really about negative rights. So that means protective rights rather than positive rights, like, the right to vote or education, that kind of stuff. That's not part of the deal. So rights are individual things in the sense that they are there to protect individuals who need protection. And of course, other animals need protection more than most. Tom Reagan, the famous animal rights philosopher, said that we can think of rights as protective shields or a fence around each individual, a wall
And on that fence or wall, there is a no trespass sign. So that's what it's like. It's kind of saying, you don't come into my space. You don't invade my bodily integrity. Unless you invite someone in, like a lover, for example. But in terms of other animals, the idea is to respect their basic rights, because that's all animal rights is. It's a basic idea. It's quite a modest idea. It's an extension of human rights thinking, but in a modest sense. Really, people shouldn't be afraid of animal rights, although clearly they are. Because, well, I suppose it's got some serious ramifications. Means that you can't experiment on them and wear them and eat them, of course. And so that's what people don't like, because they want to carry on violating the basic rights of other animals because they get some benefit from it. We're not disputing that you get a benefit from it. We're just saying that morally it's wrong. It's wrong to benefit from violating the rights of others. And as I said, animal rights are individual things. They're there to protect the vulnerable. They're there to protect those who need protection from those who would exploit and oppress them. And other animals are the most oppressed and exploited beings on the planet. A brief introduction to the history of the vegan social movements. So whether you're vegan or vegan curious or just curious, then hang on to your hats, because the journey into the history of the vegan movement is full of surprises. For example, did you know that the vegan social movement was born during the Second World War in 1944? The founders of the vegan movement lived through this terrible conflict. It's hard to imagine what they went through. Some said that they found the experience shattering and shocking, and they thought it revealed the fact that humanity was in crisis. Therefore, before the end of this conflict, the vegans declared peace. They invited people to include veganism as part of their peace aims for the future, because they saw veganism as part of human moral evolution. And they said this is a crucial and necessary part of the future. In 1945, Donald Watson, the best known of the co-founders of the vegan social movement, was asked to specify what veganism was all about. He said it was about opposing the exploitation of sentient life. Watson went on to describe the vegan movement as the greatest cause on earth. And why so important? He said because this movement was the only one that could save humanity. Sociologist Matthew Cole studies the vegan social movement, and he says that it concentrated from the beginning on intersected goals, the end of animal exploitation and a less violent humanity. He says that the vegan pioneers had intertwined goals of transforming human beings and transforming human society. We do that, the pioneers argued, by altering our attitudes to other animals. That is also the key to human liberation, they thought. The general idea was summed up very well in the 1990s by Kath Clements. One writer who greatly influenced the vegan social movement was Leslie Cross. He also helped to develop plant milks, along with an entrepreneur and business person called Arthur Ling. Cross developed a position I call focus and scope. This is an important kind of debate and aspect of the modern day vegan movement. Cross said that veganism was about abolishing animal use, but that's not the full concerns of vegans. Cross said clearly that vegans are on the side of the liberators. He says in a vegan world, there would be no hunting, no vivisection, no animal agriculture, and so on. He said in 1951 that the idea is not to make the human use of other animals more tolerant, but to abolish that use. He said that veganism was not so much welfare as liberation. However, Cross maintained that veganism includes what he called a second broad aspect. This second aspect is where the idea of human evolution comes in, the moral evolution of humanity. The idea is that as we liberate other animals, we liberate ourselves. Indeed, Cross suggested that the benefits to humans would be difficult to calculate. They're so great. Now, right from the beginning, the role of several women were very important in the development of the vegan social movement. For example, it's quite likely that Dorothy Morgan and Sally Shrigley came up with the word vegan to describe the new social movement they had co-founded with 5 or 6 others. Sally Shrigley, along with Donald Watson, had asked the Vegetarian Society whether they'd be willing to have a non-dairy section. The Vegetarian Society refused, and so therefore, within a few weeks, the vegan movement was born. It's often suggested that the word vegan comes from the first 3 and the last 2 letters of vegetarian, which has led in recent years to this rather unkind slogan being born. Shrigley became the press and minute secretary of the Vegan Society and served the society for a full 33 years. It's said that she was an idealist, just as with the other pioneers they were called anti-establishment. In a way, they had to defy the norms and values of their society because the vegan social movement pioneers, they were virtually all told that they were going to die, and that was by people like doctors and vegetarians that knew them. Sociologist Matthew Cole says that another pioneer, Faye Henderson, who wrote some of the Vegan Society's literature and also toured Britain and Ireland in aid of the cause, was the person who originated the idea that we now call vegan education. From 1946, the vegan movement was writing about famine and human food security issues. By 1948, Faye Henderson was suggesting that things were so serious that humanity was threatened. And she developed a theme which was a concern for many years of the vegan pioneers, and that was the quality of the soil. Henderson wrote, "Give and take is a good rule in all phases of life, and it especially applies to our relationship with the soil." This concern about the soil is also contained in one of the most powerful statements by any of the vegan movement pioneers. In 1964, Eva Batt produced a booklet called Why Veganism? And she said that veganism was about a way of living which avoided exploitation of human and other animals, and indeed of the soil. Modern day vegans will know that the dairy industry want only cow milk to bear the words milk. This was an issue right back in the 1960s. The vegan pioneers were already engaged in it. For example, Eva Batt suggested that the word milk should be used in its technical sense. She even argued that butter made from cow milk should be called cow butter. I'm not quite sure that the dairy industry in the 21st century would go for that either. Eva Batt claimed that products with animal parts in it should be clearly labelled. Anyone for calf food cheese, perhaps? You never know. She said this labelling should be the case regardless of whether the other animals were farmed intensively or not. Once again, reinforcing Cross's idea that veganism is about liberation and not welfare. By the time we get to the 1970s, most of what the vegan social movement was doing in terms of producing literature was written by Kathleen Janaway and her husband, Jack. And just like Donald Watson, they were both conscientious objectors during the war years. It's a bit of a vegan in-joke, really, to say that vegan HQ was at the Janaways, because at the time they lived in a village in England called Leatherhead. We get the impression from her writings that Kathleen Janaway had a keen sociological understanding of the problems that social movements face when it comes to forging radical social change. She talks about customs, she talks about the way that children are brought up in terms of tradition and in terms of the values that their parents are transmitting to them generation after generation. Both Kathleen and Jack Janaway seem to adhere to Donald Watson's idea that people need to be ripened up to new ideas, even though those new ideas are tempered by tradition. And Janaway herself was very keen to understand the power of the media in terms of advertising. as, in a way, a block to social movement advancement. In 1976, Kathleen Janaway was featured on the BBC in a program called Open Door. This is where the BBC would allow their resources to be used by social movements in order for the movement to make a film of their own. This film now looks very dated, although it's still available online. In fact, parts of the film were used by comedian Simon Amstell in his pro-vegan mockumentary called Carnage, which was released in 2017. Despite its dated appearance now, the documentary created a huge surge in membership of the vegan social movement back in the day. Kathleen Janaway, like the earliest of the vegan pioneers, was conscious of the fact that human progress, in a moral sense, seemed to have faltered. She believed this was partly due to their exploitation and use of other animals. Janaway argued that humanity needs to end its dependence on slaughterhouses, especially in relation to children. She thought that their moral development and their compassionate development was held back and hindered if their parents forced them to eat animal products. Janaway said that fundamental changes in the values and practices of the dominant world system, which has created a situation in which millions of people and animals already suffer extreme deprivation and die prematurely, is essential. She went on to explore what she called the vegan way, and also explore the idea of a tree-based culture with a new group that she formed, which was called Movement for Compassionate Living. Now, obviously, a social movement cannot really function properly if it's based at a person's house. And so this is where the aforementioned Arthur Ling comes into the story, in the sense that Arthur Ling was a remarkable business person and started his vegan journey in 1926. He was also a pioneer in terms of biodiesel and also in plant milks. In terms of what he did for the vegan social movement, he put it on a more sustainable footing in terms of organizing an office and staff and professionalizing the organization as it stands now. As a sociologist, the ironic thing there is that if you read social movement theory, we know that when a group does professionalize, then that means its radical core can be threatened. This, to some extent, has happened with the vegan social movement. It's an ongoing battle of ideas, as animal rights philosopher Tom Regan would put it.
In the battle of ideas, the philosophy of animal rights wins, its critics lose. It remains to be seen which side emerges as the victor in the ongoing political battle between what is just and what is not.
So, Earthlings, there we have it. That's something of a whistle-stop tour through parts of the history of the vegan social movement. We are left with a picture of a revolutionary group who were really movers and shakers of their time. They declared peace during a global conflict, and then they set about exploring what they wanted to do about it, and also kind of organizing in a social movement sense. You could say really that the beginning of the vegan social movement was rather chaotic, but now it's a professional organization. You could also say that some of the revolutionary values of the group maybe have been tempered over time. And again, that's part of the discussion that goes on within a social movement. One thing that sociologists know about social movements is that they move, they evolve over time. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's crucial. Otherwise, they would stagnate. Right, and so, Ronnie, before we start, I noticed today you were promoting Veganuary.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, how you doing, young man?
I'm all right. I had COVID, so I wasn't very well for a few days, but I'm pretty much over it now. I wouldn't say I'm 100%, but I've been well enough to go out and deliver a few leaflets and stuff like that. So I'm on the mend.
They reckon it's still around, but it's mild now. Would you say that's what you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, it tends to be what happens with viruses, because apparently it's not really in the interests of virus to kill people, because if a person's killed, they can't go around spreading the virus. And the interest of the virus,
kill the
right,
host,
if you can put it that way, is to spread as much as possible. And a dead person or a really ill person who's confined somewhere can't spread the virus. So they tend to mutate. They tend to mutate in a way that makes them more mild. So they infect people, but the effects on people are milder. Apparently that's what happened with the Spanish flu over 100 years ago. I was talking to a guy that was like, had been a virologist or something. That's what he said. He said it just became
he
mild.
must have been old. I thought you were going to say I knew somebody who had it.
No, he wasn't. I don't think it was quite around at the time of the Spanish flu, but that's what he said happened with that.
So you've had COVID, but Ronnie, you're still alive, right?
I'm still very much alive, yes.
Well, so we're both still alive, which is pretty good. So
yeah,
hello to everybody,
we wouldn't have much of a show if we weren't both alive.
No, it wouldn't be too good. And this is a bit of a different show, is because I think only for the second time, Ronnie's got kind of admin powers for this. So
yes, so watch out,
means
everyone.
Yeah. So what could go wrong with Ronnie having his fingers on the button? But
although I think I might give the admin powers to Misty here, who I'm sure.
Right, yeah, we're both going to go off the screen if you do that.
She'd be a far better admin than me, I think.
Yeah. So I think we can mainly both do the same now, Ronnie. Except I've got one more or two more executive powers than you. For example,
so you're still the big. You're still the big.
Yeah, I'm still the big vegan cheese. I've got one of those Austin Power buttons that Dr. Evil thing, so I can do this.
You've got an ejector seat thing for me.
Yeah, it'll cast you into the pit of doom or whatever it was called. So, hello, vegan pundit. How's you? And hello, Deb from the States, and hello, Ra as well. So we've got 9 watching, but only 3 in the chat so far. So come and say hello, everyone. As always, just to kind of mark your card, is this is the way it works. Is if you're on anything other than my YouTube channel, then that's the best place to be for the chat, because this one's probably going to be quite interactive, I would think, Ronnie, with a bit of luck, because of the nature of what we're going to do. And then it means that comment away, because we never charge people to have their comments put on the screen. So we don't do that. Don't believe in it. So there is that. Right. So Ronnie, we decided that we would do a watch along of Natalie Fulton's recent video. Actually, I wrote a couple of things down about it. It's got 157 comments at the moment, the original video, and also it's had 2,400 views. So it's kind of been seen.
Yes, yeah,
probably a bit more than this will be seen. But
well, this gets seen quite a lot when it's shared. So as well as our viewers that are live, I'll say hello to all the people that watch the shared version when it gets shared on Facebook.
Yeah, who are not alive. So
yeah.
So we're gonna be watching along now. So the idea is not to kind of critique it really. It's just that we use it as kind of like a conversation starter, really, isn't it, Ronnie? That's the idea.
It is really, yes, yeah.
Yeah. Now there is a couple of things to say though before we start, which is that there's a content warning. There was quite a lot of graphic scenes, but I've covered them over, so you won't see anything graphic at all. So don't worry about that. I couldn't do anything about the audio, but there's nothing particularly, there's no, as it were, I don't think there's any pig screaming and all that kind of thing. So graphic wise, it's not too bad. Unfortunately, in the main video, there is quite a lot of ableist language, which is a bit of a shame. And also, Natalie is a big fan of this vegetarian concept called carnism, which is always disappointing to me. I still don't know why vegans love this vegetarian idea so much. And also, it puts the emphasis on veganism as a diet. And so, Ronnie, before we start, I noticed today you were promoting Veganuary.
Oh, yes.
But doesn't that do the same? Does that do
Well,
the same?
it promotes veganism as a diet, but then it does talk about what happens to the other animals and why that's wrong. I think it uses.
Yeah, but are you
veganism
sure
as a
about
diet
that, Ronnie? Have you
as
checked? Have you checked
Oh,
out
it's on,
the
yeah,
website?
definitely on. If you look on the website,
No, but have you
that's
checked
on
it
there.
this year? Because it changes year by year, doesn't it?
Well, it says on certainly on the leaflets we've had printed, it talks about the animals and what happens to the animals. It just isn't about the food. I mean, it kind of leads. It kind of leads with the food, but I'm okay with that as long as the ethical reasons for veganism are in there and people can come to those. So I'm, yeah, it probably could be better than it is, but certainly I do think a lot of people have become vegan because of Veganuary. I mean, genuine ethical vegans because of Veganuary. So I think it is something worth promoting for that reason.
Okay, so you're going to get a few ethical vegans and quite a lot of plant-based eaters through it, then probably.
Well, yeah, but you see, even if you get plant-based eaters, yeah, that's not as good as people being ethical vegans, but at least they're not contributing. They're not encouraging other animals to be farmed and to be slaughtered. So, as soon as if someone's not going to be an ethical vegan, I'd rather they were plant-based than continue to eat animal products, although that's not perfect.
Yeah, of course. I just thought I'd ask that because when I only saw it today, funny enough, the first time I saw it.
Yes, yeah. I've had a few people. In fact, I've had people from different parts of the world. But basically, what I've done, if people look on my Facebook.
You posted it 3 days ago, didn't you? 3 days.
What we did locally, Veganuary don't produce leaflets, but they produce the artwork, so people can get the leaflets printed from the artwork. And we had 5,000 printed to door drop locally. It's something we kind of do pretty much every year, really. And so I thought, well, I'll make a video. I've made a video. Basically encouraging other people to do the same and saying that to kind of make things quicker, if they get in touch with me, I'll send them the artwork, which I've done. And there's a guy in Africa who's had the artwork. There's someone in Brazil, somebody in the United States, and a few people in here in the UK I've sent it to as well. I mean, I'm hoping more will get in touch as time goes on, so that we can get a lot of people outdoor dropping.
So you think? See, I'm always a bit wary of leading with the diet thing, especially when all the media is going to be diet orientated, and quite a lot of it's all to do with there's going to be a mentor, and it's recipes every day and diet, isn't it?
Well, I think in terms of living as a vegan, the diet thing's a big aspect. Obviously, it's the biggest thing that someone has to change in their everyday life. But I think as long it leads on to the ethical, it's rather like the booklet I'm always talking about. We have in our stores from Animal Aid, which is plant-based cooking on a budget, and that basically it looks like a recipe booklet. And because it looks like a recipe booklet, people aren't frightened to take it. But there's information inside after the recipes. There's information about the ethical reasons for veganism, and so I see it a bit like a kind of Trojan horse in a sense.
So if you had a leaflet saying the ethical reasons for veganism, people wouldn't take them.
Well, I think it depends. I think a lot is to do with the images. The images on the front are of some very tasty looking food. Rather than if on the front of the leaflet was an animal hanging up in a slaughterhouse, I don't think so many people.
Oh no, I'm not advocating that, obviously. No.
So I think yes, because and it's just a way of because I want people to have information, take information away that they can read. Otherwise, they haven't got anything to to learn from, and it's a good way of kind of it's a good way of getting people to take away the information, because people are they come up to the store. A lot of people are already interested. They've kind of heard about veganism, or they certainly heard about plant-based eating. And so yeah, and it's a kind of similar thing. It's kind of using it as a kind of using the food as a kind of gateway, really, to the ethics.
Yeah, I think what it needs to make that work for me is to think very, very carefully about what's said and when and how often and that kind of stuff. Debbie's asking, is Veganuary an actual organization? It is, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's an organisation. I think there are people employed by Veganuary too. It's very much an online concept, which is why they're kind of. I mean, ideally, they'd print the leaflets themselves and mail them out to people, and then a lot more people would be prepared to kind of distribute them. But I think because they're very much online focused, that the printing of like physical leaflets is kind of very much a sideline, and
It's
that's why it's like
the same people, isn't it, Ronnie, that did the $1 billion thing?
no, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. No, that's some. What was that? What was that organisation? That wasn't Veganuary. Whether it's any of the individual people the same, I don't know. But that was
it was called $1 Million Vegan.
Was that $1 Million Vegan? Was it?
Yeah, but I thought it was the same crowd, but I could be wrong.
I mean, it may or may not be. I don't know. Was it the same name? But who knows how many different organisations these people are involved in, or what names they? There's all these different names coming up all the time, isn't there, for things?
So yeah, that's the you've heard me make this point before, Ronnie. So
yes, I mean, yes, that is true, and I kind of accept that. But I think, like, in terms of in terms of kind of promoting veganism, like I think that you've got to weigh things up, and it is true that that basically, if anyone wants to send a donation, Veganuary are going to get the donation for that. But like, on their website and stuff, they are, providing information that will help people go vegan, or at least help people go plant-based. So they are, these people are putting work in. So it's kind of one of those. And I think the bottom line is, that I'd ask myself is, does Veganuary, or has Veganuary caused people to become vegan? And I think the answer to that is definitely yes. I mean, I know people that become vegan because of Veganuary, so that the answer to that is yes. And so because the answer to that is yes, and I think it's a substantial number, then I think it's something worth promoting, despite the fact that it might not be 100% perfect.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, I didn't really want to put you on the spot. Well, I did really, but I didn't really want to put you on the spot.
No, please, I've been able to promote it. I mean, if anyone
I mean, you say people who've gone ethical vegan because of, I mean, how many?
Oh, it's hard to say, but I mean, a few, because one of the things I do is I'm always curious as to why people go vegan, and I tend to always, if I, get in conversation with vegans, I'll say, one of the things I like to ask them is, what caused you to become vegan? And there have been a few that have said, "Oh, I did, I did Veganuary," and kind of stuck. I mean, not everyone sticks with it, but obviously they did. But the reason, I mean, it's interesting in like the conclusion I've come to, really, from talking to people, asking why they become vegan, is that we need all manner of promotion of veganism, because there's loads these days, loads of different ways people have become vegan.
Well, we've got loads of people doing the diet thing already. That's what I would say to that. And the only thing that I'm a bit skeptical about is the fact that I do know that there was one year where there was quite a lot of ethics, maybe the second year, and that could have been because there was a bit of pushback. And then I noticed that year after, it all gone again. In fact, I think year 3 was even worse than year 1, something like that. So yeah, I always say to people, you need to check the website every year, see if it's still there, I think.
Overall, I think people become vegan because, and I think really a considerable number of people become vegan because of it. And even if people only go plant-based, that's still a positive. It's not as positive as we'd like, but it's still, you know, it's still a positive, isn't it? So overall, I think it's a positive initiative and something I'm prepared to promote, really, and try to get other people to promote.
You are. You've got no shame. So
I've never had shame.
No,
as you
no.
know.
Okay, so let's do what we're supposed to do. So Natalie Fulton about 2 weeks ago put together a thing. She was kind of saying these are things that vegans should stop saying. They should never say. She was quite certain about it. But then she did say, "I'm not saying don't ever say it. I'm just saying that I don't like them." That's essentially where she was going. So we thought we would use them as starting points. As I said, there is some ableist language in this, but also it's very fast moving. So what we're going to do is take it one question at a time, and I'll try and stop it every time it changes. I think I've vaguely got an idea of where it goes. So we should go. So all right. Now, first of all, Ronnie, you've got to do the face. You've got to do the.
I've got to do that. I've got to do the same face as her.
Yeah, everybody's got to do the ooh to start off. Yeah, that's it, yeah. Otherwise, the video just don't work. Okay, so here we go.
What are the terrible pro-vegan arguments that I wish people would stop using? Just to clarify, I'm not saying that you have to stop using these or that you should never use them. I'm just explaining why I don't like them and what I think you should say instead. When I was in high school, there was one annoying vegetarian named Brian. Now, he wasn't annoying because he was vegetarian. He was annoying for other reasons and happened to be vegetarian. One day, he decided to challenge me and he said, "You can't kill an animal yourself, so why pay someone else to do it?" I remember thinking then, when I was 15 years old, that this was a stupid argument. I easily debunked it by saying, first of all, he doesn't know that I can't kill an animal. I've never tried. Maybe I could do it. Maybe I couldn't. It would be impossible to know because I haven't tried. Then I told him there were many things in my life that I paid for but couldn't do myself. I can't make shirts, but I pay someone to make shirts, and I also told him that he can't grow his own vegetables, but he pays other people to do that. Now that I'm no longer 15, I have even better ways to debunk this ridiculous argument. The idea that the morality of an action is determined by whether or not the person committing the crime is okay with it is absolutely bonkers. Imagine you were explaining that murder is wrong, and you said, "Thou shan't murder because thou couldn't do it to yourself." It may be true that most people wouldn't have the ability to murder someone, but that's not why murder is wrong. Murder is wrong because you're taking someone's life away from them. You're violating their most fundamental right and creating suffering all around them. Jeffrey Dahmer feels comfortable raping and murdering, therefore rape and murder is okay. What? In the same way, buying animal products is wrong because you're violating the animal's rights and creating suffering for them. Whether or not you'd be okay with it has nothing to do with the morality of that action. Is hunting okay because hunters kill the animals they eat? All that being said, I do know some people who are vegan or vegetarian because of that argument, and I understand the point vegans are trying to make, which is that paying someone to kill baby animals for you is fucking pathetic. Well, I personally hate this argument because it falls apart under the slightest logical scrutiny. I do recognize that it appears to be effective. First of all, we are
Right, so there's number 2 coming up. So Ronnie, number 1 there, do you think it's as bad as Natalie says?
Well, it's not. It's kind of it's kind of odd because she sort of made out that the guy came up and kind of just said that to her out of the blue. But obviously, that must have been part of a conversation that that had gone on for some time before. Somebody's not going to come up
the vegetarian guy.
Yeah, the vegetarian guy. Yeah. Somebody's not going to come up and say, "Wait, you wouldn't pay, you wouldn't kill an animal yourself, so why are you paying someone else to do it?" That would be in the context of a conversation, wouldn't it? I mean, how I tend to use that would be to kind of point out to someone that there's no moral difference between killing an animal themselves and paying someone else to do it for them, and that isn't anything to do with whether that person themselves had the capability to kill an animal, either psychologically or physically. It's just that morally that there's no difference really between those two things. You know, if you pay someone to kill another human, you can be tried for murder the same as the person you actually paid to kill the person. It's the same. And that's how I tend to talk
You'd
about
be in
it.
a conspiracy trial with them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it'd be a conspiracy to murder thing. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, well, I agree with you that there is a fact that I think that's a bit of a fault line with all of these, in the sense that these are just isolated, drawn out of it, and you're not quite sure, you know, who said that, where would it go afterwards, who said it first, even, because I think some of these they almost like sound like what a vegan might say if somebody says. And in terms of kind of language on this, I wrote a few things down, because there was something that was bothering me watching it. So I watched it a couple of times. First of all, the actual caption was, "If you can't kill another animal yourself, ... right?" Then she talks about the vegetarian person who said, "You can't kill another animal yourself, so therefore." So that's a little bit different. Then she said that the morality of an action is not determined whether the person is okay with it, which seems to be a separate question, or, you know, related separate question. And then she did that biblical thing, you know, thou canst murdereth and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was a bit odd.
Because you couldn't do it to yourself, she said. So that's another kind of difference. And then finally she said, is hunting okay? Because hunters kill they kill their own food, which I suppose is kind of related. But I thought there was a little bit of kind of jiggling about going on in terms of the.
I mean, the danger of saying to someone, you know, you couldn't kill an animal yourself, so therefore it's wrong to pay someone else to do it, is that implies that if you could kill another animal yourself, then it would be all right.
The thing is, though, I think that the one of those that I've known about is when people say things like, well, I couldn't do it myself, but, right? And that's when you go, well, if you can't do it yourself.
Yeah, so you're paying someone else to do it, and really that equates to the same thing.
Yeah, and then, you know, I mean, one complaint of Natalie throughout, really, as you'll see in a bit, is the fact that there's not that much emphasis on the victims or the ethics and stuff, which is kind of true. But again, this is not as though it's going to be, you know, one person says this is what the vegan says, and then they all go home. It's going to be part of a conversation, right? And so that's the bit of a difficulty with it. So interesting. Should we move on to the second one?
Yep.
Okay.
They're not the only species that breastfeeds from another species. Here's a picture of a baby pig breastfeeding from a dog after her mother rejected her. There's also a dog who nursed baby tigers. I understand these are rare cases and animals don't go around regularly breastfeeding from each other, especially not when they're adults, but dogs also consume dairy too. Starbucks even created the puppuccino, which is when you go to the drive-thru, they give you some whipped cream to give to your dog. And people complain about feeding a dog a healthy plant-based diet when they're giving their dogs whipped cream. That's insane. The main reason I hate this argument is because humans are the only species that does many, many things. We're the only species that builds rocket ships, that writes sitcoms, that jerks off to tentacle porn. I mean, maybe octopus do that. I don't know.
Do you know that humans are the only animal that drink the milk of other animals? You know what else only people do? Fly planes, make movies, call each other on the phone and tell each other how awesome milk is. What the fuck kind of goofy ass point is that?
When your argument makes it into Joe Rogan's stand-up routine, you know it's bullshit. Next, this is some.
Okay, not quite sure whether.
Of course, most of the other examples of things that that only humans do aren't that great either, are they?
No. But my first thought was, just because Joe Rogan says so doesn't prove anything.
No.
Really.
But
yeah, go on, right?
No, I was just going to say that once again is like kind of how I talk about this is, if it came up into a conversation while doing outreach, for example, it's not to say, we're the only species that drinks milk of another species, but to point out that that cow's milk is actually meant for calves, is actually produced to feed calves, and it's not produced to feed humans, which isn't the same thing as saying that there aren't other species that sometimes might drink the milk of another species.
I do remember, and I think we mentioned this before we came on air, actually, that when I first heard this argument, it was always said that we are the only species that does this, apart from ants who farm aphids, which is farming milk aphids. That was always the claim back then. And you said also caterpillars, yeah?
I think there are some ants that kind of get these caterpillars and pamper the caterpillar and bring the caterpillar food, because there's some secretion that comes from the caterpillar that the ants like to eat or drink, and it's kind of very similar to the aphid thing, where they are sort of farming these animals. But that's that's kind of really nothing to do with what humans do in relation to cows and calves. If there's something that we produce to drink and have in our tea and on our cereal and stuff like that, that results in this horrendous slaughter, suffering, oppression, exploitation of other animals, and yet we can have something else in our tea or coffee, whatever, that doesn't do that, then really we're morally obliged to choose the one that doesn't do that, which is the plant milk, aren't we? You see, that would be how I talk to people about it, really.
Yeah. Do you think vegans would say this when the claim is that it's natural to drink cow milk?
Yeah, I think if someone says, "Oh, it's a natural product," then yes, you could respond and say, "Yeah, but hang on a minute, that's the cow's milk is for calves, the same as a human mother's breast milk is for a human child. So how is that? How can you call that natural?" And then they've got to justify why they've said it's natural when it kind of obviously isn't a milk.
Yeah, because I mean the plant-based doctors, McGregor, I think in particular, have got a version of this by saying that I think he calls it some, because I always say calf milk. Calf food I call cow milk, but he was saying kind of bovine growth fluid or something like that.
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, which is why a lot of humans have to skim it, because it's too fatty in that, really, for humans.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. So it's kind of. Yeah, this isn't this as Natalie put it, this isn't a good argument to use, as she put it. But I think that you kind of, the fact that that the milk from a cow is meant for a calf is something that kind of is okay to, obviously
I
okay
just
to
use it as a springboard to talk about rights violations myself.
Yes.
Here's a question: what did you think of the examples that she gave, Ronnie? For example, she said, here's a dog feeding a piglet, and then here's another dog feeding tigers, and then she's talking about dogs consuming dairy at Starbucks or something. She said, I know these are rare cases. It struck me that these are totally artificial cases, not rare. I mean, like, who brought the piglet to the dog? It's going to have to be a human, right?
It would be a human, and this would be an extreme and rare circumstance, wouldn't it? Nowhere anywhere near as widespread as the consumption of like cow's milk by humans.
But she was using that to say, "Oh, this proves that humans are not the only ones." But yes, the examples were artificial.
Yeah, and as Deb says, they kind of are human caused, aren't they? These are these are things that humans,
I mean, you're not going to get
that wouldn't happen in were humans not part of the equation. Those things wouldn't happen. In where humans weren't involved, just totally in the natural world, those things wouldn't happen.
Yeah, she kind of implies the rare cases wouldn't happen a lot, but they wouldn't happen at all, would they?
No, they wouldn't. Not without the intervention of humans. No, or the impact of humans. That's
yeah,
very true.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one. And then she also said humans are the only species that do many things. Not quite sure where that gets us, but I can kind of understand why she might not be too keen on that, I guess. So here's one I think that we've both come across in the past, Ronnie. So let's see if we can do this one.
Something you hear at Cubes when meat eaters don't want to watch the cruelty they're funding. I understand why this argument is popular because it highlights the hypocrisy of non-vegans being unable to stomach what they literally put into their stomachs. However, I think this argument misses a bigger point, which is that watching slaughterhouse footage is unpleasant and eating meat is enjoyable. I mean, not for vegans who know where it comes from, but carnists love it. They get the benefits of animal slaughter without having to deal with it psychologically, so why would they want to? However, my main problem with this argument is that you're forgetting the actual victims, the animals. You're framing the flesh as not being good enough for the meat eater when instead we should be focusing on the harm it causes to the animals. When people refuse to watch footage, I prefer to say this: if you won't watch it, how is it fair for you to pay for animals to go through it? This centers the animals and reminds carnists that they should have to watch something they're literally paying for someone else to go through. Sometimes I see.
Right, that was a painful one for me with all the cruelty and the carnage stuff. But yeah, and this is the one where she gets closest. Well, not closest because the one at the end is the closest one, but she does kind of start to kind of touch on the cultural thing when she said that slaughterhouse footage is unpleasant, but eating flesh she described it as pleasant, which I suppose most people would agree with that. And so they would then go, well, why should I want the pleasure, but I don't want the unpleasure.
Yeah, but I mean, basically, you've got to get people to kind of consider, what's done to animals to provide that product for them to eat, because basically it's just these animals are being oppressed, being slaughtered, being exploited, really just for a taste. It's just to provide a particular taste, and it's just to provide entertainment. I mean, if you asked, pretty much everyone or most people, do you think it's right to kill other animals for entertainment, for your entertainment? And most people say no, absolutely no, that's wrong. And say, well, really, that's the situation regarding consuming animal products, because you don't need to eat those products for your own health and survival, and all you're doing is eating them for your entertainment because you enjoy a particular taste. And is that justifiable?
Yeah, do you think it's I mean, it's potentially a conversation starter, really, isn't it? In the sense that you can then ask, well, I see you're having difficulty watching this, but isn't that in itself interesting? The fact
yes,
that,
of course, that can be used as a conversation starter. And of course, I think it kind of is, where people do the type of outreach where they show these, get people to watch the videos. Yeah.
Do you remember the Late Show that we have with Tom Reagan? There was a bit where somebody in the audience tried this kind of gambit, and the guy who was being questioned, this horrible kind of patriarchal guy, he said, well, I've never seen childbirth, but I love my children, kind of thing. And so he's making this distinction that you would naturally separate out the unpleasant from the pleasant. And we know from Freud that people go out their way to avoid unpleasure, as he put it. But that doesn't mean that they don't want the pleasure. What they would try to do then is disconnect it in their mind.
Yeah, it's a question of what the price of that pleasure is. You see, and that doesn't really tie in with the childbirth thing. When a child is born, that child isn't being oppressed or exploited. That child is just being kind of, so to speak, brought into the world, aren't they? And although it might not be a particularly pleasant thing to see, it isn't a situation of oppression, is it? Which is completely different to the situation of animals.
Well, some people would argue it was, but we won't go there. But Deb is saying paying someone else to do it can include a lot of activities. Bad argument, in my humble opinion. So, was that your argument, Ronnie, or was it?
No. Well, it's how you say it. In other words, that to say, if you if you can't do it yourself, you shouldn't pay someone else to do it. That was kind of the argument that I think Natalie was kind of was talking
Yeah,
about.
I'd almost like do the sociology of it and go,
yeah,
you know, I find it interesting that you're distressed by watching this thing that you do pay for. You understand that you pay for it, you know. So, so let's explore that. I think that is where the kind of cultural conversation could start.
Yeah. I mean, you know, what I would say is that really there is no difference morally between doing it yourself and paying someone else to do it for you. You know, that's the approach I take, and that's rather different, because that has nothing to do with whether you could do it yourself at all. It's to do with those things really being the moral equivalent of one another.
Yeah, so it's a kind of distant relation of number one then point, really, isn't it? I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're up to number 4 now. This is disingenuous arguments. See what we make of this.
Vegans who I know for a fact are atheists making Christian arguments, and it just makes me cringe. I understand that it's important to meet people where they're at, but you can do that without lying to them. I would never make the argument that the devil is more likely to have created slaughterhouses because I don't believe in the devil. That's just as absurd as me arguing that Harry Potter would be vegan. Hermione, though, really should be vegan, and it's honestly insane that she's not. I mean, all that stuff with the house elves and she's torturing animals 3 times a day, it just makes no sense. But I consider the Bible to be fiction, so me using the Bible to argue for veganism would be absurd. That being said, if you are religious, use all the religious arguments that you want. The point is that you have to be honest with yourself and the person you're talking to. It's like when you go home for Christmas and your uncle, who only eats Popeyes and McDonald's, tells you that a vegan diet is unhealthy. You just can't take it seriously. Anytime a vegan is making an argument that they don't really believe, the non-vegan can sense it and it will discredit the vegan. Think about the salesperson who's trying to sell a product that they don't believe in. The customers can sense it and are less likely to buy. When people ask me about outreach, one thing I always emphasize is being true to yourself. Since we don't have data on what works during outreach, it makes sense to do what's honest for you and keeps you doing outreach. If you're naturally more aggressive, be more aggressive during outreach. If you're a bit more soft-spoken, then roll with that. Don't try to be someone else because it's unsustainable and it will burn you out. Every time.
So
she's dealt with a couple of separate things there, hasn't she?
Yeah, I think she has. Yeah.
So there's 2 points. I mean, the first one is about, like, you know, pretending to be religious when you're discussing veganism with religious people. I mean, we had a guy in our group that used to pretend to be a Christian and go and talk to Christian people. I kind of always hated it. Because he wasn't a Christian and he used to pretend to go and try and persuade Christians to become vegan. Because I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to do that. I mean, I was doing a stall. It must be a couple of years now, and some Jehovah's Witnesses came up, and I think they were trying to convert me to Jehovah or something. You know what they do. And I started talking to them about veganism. And of course, the difficulty is with that situation is, are you going to have a discussion regarding veganism, or are you going to have a discussion about the existence of God? I'm an atheist, so I think religion is nonsense, mumbo jumbo, and I think, although I think there's some very, very good religious people and some very, very good religious people that, you know, promote veganism and animal rights, I think they'd be like that anyway, even without religion. And I think religion is and has been a major driver of speciesism and human supremacy. So that's my position. You know, I'm a committed atheist. But was I going to argue with these Jehovah's Witnesses as to whether or not God existed, or was I going to talk about veganism? So they said, "Oh, God says that we can eat meat." So I said, does God say that you did he say you had to? Of course, for them, God's a him. Did he say that you have to eat meat? did he order you to eat meat? Oh, no. He said that we can. I said, therefore, it's nothing to do with God. You're still making a personal choice as to whether to eat meat or not. That's still your choice. It's nothing to do with God. So let's not talk about God. Let's talk about that personal choice that you've made. And I said, do you believe God is all good, all loving and all that? And of course I do. And I said, well, then why would God want other animals to be slaughtered and to suffer and to be oppressed when that's not necessary? Why would a loving, good God want that? You see, so I kind of met them where they were without me pretending to be religious. I challenged them on what they believed already themselves, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
because
but just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you can't cite the Bible. I mean,
no.
I mean, like one thing you could say is the last time I looked, didn't it say "Thou shalt not kill"?
Yeah, and then they need then you've asked them a question. So I think it's always important to ask people questions, and then so they have to respond, because then they have to think rather than constantly telling people. You see, I think one of the mistakes people make when they're doing outreach is they try to say too much. They try to tell everyone everything, and have all this stuff gushing out of their mouth about what happens to the animals. I kind of think that's a mistake. I think that it's important to probably let the other person do most of the talking and to just ask them questions, so they've got to think themselves about things, if you see what I mean. And then also you're less likely to get into an argument, because you're kind of discussing what their views are and kind of perhaps gently challenging what their views were. And I said, in the end, these guys just walked off because they obviously knew that I wasn't going to become a Jehovah's Witness. But you could tell that I could tell I'd given them something to think about, because they weren't able to counter what I said. And we did. It was all very friendly, and there was no argument there. But they obviously had difficulty. Kind of, how could this thing about how could a loving, God that's loving and kind and all these nice things they think God is, how could that God, want animals to be slaughtered when they don't need to be, for instance? I could see they had difficulties with that.
Yeah, except that by your own logic, he doesn't want it. I mean, he kind of allows it. That's one question. But he doesn't mandate it. There's no religion that mandates.
It's still that person's choice. It's nothing. You see, so I said, well, it's nothing to do with God, is it? Your choice to consume animal products is just to do with you. It's nothing to do with God. God hasn't told you to consume those animal products. So you've chosen yourself.
Said, why would God want other animals to be slaughtered? But he doesn't, or it doesn't. She doesn't.
Well, no, exactly. But you see, that's right. So I was thinking, well, they believe these things already, and let's kind of shine the light of what they believe already on their consumption of animal products.
Yeah, but the point is, Ronnie, that I think that naturally kind of implies that only religious people should be able to talk about religious arguments, but there's no reason why you couldn't, deconstruct it the way that you have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the thing where you'd agree is that you don't pretend to be religious.
I didn't pretend to be religious at all. I didn't say what I was, but I didn't want to get into a discussion about whether God existed or not, because that would have taken the conversation down another road, if you see what I mean. I mean, I wouldn't mind my other imaginary character.
Yeah, well, Tom Reagan was pretty religious, and so he would. I mean, he's got this film called "We Are All Noah" for a start, and so he would take on the religious argument, because he would talk about how the Garden of Eden was a vegan garden, and it was only after the fall, the disobedience, and all that kind of stuff. So he would actually take events that alleged events from the Bible and make animal rights arguments for them, which I don't think is a problem, and I don't think you have to be religious to do that. You could have done it as much as Reagan.
Oh yes, if that's what that person believes in, you meet them where they are. What they believe in, and all these people that believe in God, they think God's all powerful, God knows everything, God's all loving, God's all kind, and all that. You believe all that about God. So you say, well, hang on, if that's what God is, how come so and so and so and so and so and so? And then they have to come back with an answer to that.
Reasonable vegan, still alive, I see. So I didn't know that. I haven't seen him for ages. So there you go. Now, okay, should we move on?
Is there an unreasonable vegan? I wonder.
Well,
or is that me?
That's all of us, isn't it? So number 5, then, shall we move on?
Yeah.
I debunk appeals to nature with Cardis, the vegans jump in with their own version. You'll hear vegans say that we're herbivores and eating meat is unnatural, and honestly, I'm not sure what definition of natural they're using. To me, natural just means something that happens in nature. Although
I wanted to stop there because natural is something that happens in nature. So
yeah, I was just thinking that previous clip, we didn't cover the kind of second part of that, which is where Natalie mentions about when people are doing outreach, doing what you feel comfortable with, didn't she? And that was kind of, that wasn't really connected with the previous bit, but I don't know whether we want to say a little bit about that, because I kind of tend to agree with what she said there. I kind of don't think aggression has any place in outreach, personally. She said about that if some people are naturally aggressive, so therefore be aggressive. Well, no, I tend not to agree with that. I don't think being aggressive helps in any way in outreach, to be quite honest.
Well, wouldn't I mean, like the example was Joey. I mean, Joey's more forceful than aggressive, surely.
No, I wouldn't. From what I've seen of Joey, I've seen many of Joey's videos, but I wouldn't class him as aggressive. He's kind of he's forthright. But no, that I wouldn't say he's aggressive. No. So if she thinks that's aggressive, then I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of playing up to this thing about, Joey gets called the militant vegan and this kind of stuff, and but then so do people stood around the street, showing films on laptops, so it's all a little bit relative, really.
Yes,
kind of
course, but in general terms, yes, I think that because we need all sorts of different forms of outreach, because different people are kind of more different forms of different people are affected by different things. Somebody might be more affected by video than by a leaflet, or it might be the other way around, or whatever. And because we need all different forms of outreach, yeah, I would agree that the type of outreach people should do really is what they feel most comfortable with and what suits them the best, because we need all sorts.
Yeah, I tend to be, because I get lots of Earthling Ed comments. How did you remain so calm? And I always say, well, what's the point of not? I mean, like if you see yourself as, let's think of a classroom. You're the teacher and they're the subjects. What's the point of losing your temper? You don't educate anybody by doing that.
No, exactly. And it's more like you're having a conversation with someone and you're kind of probing. You're more probing why they believe what they believe, and kind of, gently pointing out like the flaws in that and the inconsistencies.
Yeah, it's planting seeds and getting them to think, isn't it? You see, that's why I dislike this new form of activism, which a couple of people do, which is geared up to end up with you saying to them, "You're an animal abuser." I don't.
They're not going to become. Are they going to become vegan? But you see, I think a lot of that is done to play to the audience, because these videos are shared on social media, and it's to play to the audience, get lots of people watching, get all these vegans going, yeah, you defeated that.
Well, they should. Well, in that case, they should be honest and say, I don't really care about the person. I'm just trying to impress you, my fellow vegans. But I mean, they would never say that. But I got the feeling that it's a bit.
If someone ends up not liking you, and because very few people who become vegan, because of a conversation with the vegan, decide to become vegan there and then. They'll think about it afterwards, and they'll decide to go vegan at a later stage. They'll consider later what's been said.
Their overriding impression can't be what an arsehole that was.
Yeah, if they think you're an arsehole, they're going to think that he was an arsehole, and they're not going to think or consider anything you said.
No, and if they were to report the conversation to the loved ones or friends, what do you think they're going to say? I've just been called an abuser, you know.
Yeah, well, they in turn are going to be less likely to consider veganism, aren't they?
Well,
So it's
you know, it just doesn't. It's not a setup that makes any educational sense to me.
no, it doesn't. No,
No.
you can't do. Education can never be done aggressively. It's always got to be done in a friendly way. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah. Deb says something interesting because I used to. I'm not so bad now, but I used to be outraged every time I see these chuggers on the street. And these are the people who do get in your face, and they're trying to sign you up for something, and they really upset me because the first time I ever met it was I was in Bangor in North Wales, walking towards Holland and Barrett, and this guy held out a leaflet, and so I took it off him, and he kept hold of it, and so it was a bit of a tug of war kind of thing, and then I let go of it and said, well, you know, if you want it so much, mate, you know, you can have it, kind of thing. But he was just trying to get in my face and kind of engage me, and I used to go up to them and say, you know, you've really ruined it for us people on the street doing outreach, because people used to come up and you know, to get your leaflet off you, to find out what you're all about and everything. This is kind of like the basis of democracy, you know, a citizen giving information to a citizen. And now you've made everybody scared to come up to you because
I kind of
think you're going to ask them for money.
Yeah, you see, I kind of do wonder how much that. I mean, I was giving some leaflets out in the nearest town centre in the week, you know, about Christmas, going vegan for Christmas, staying vegan, and all that after Christmas, and a lot of people took them. I mean, a real secret when you're doing that is wear a high-vis jacket, because people think you're somehow official and that the kind of leaflets are more legitimate if you wear a high-vis jacket. It's a really clever ploy that I always do.
I usually a clever ploy written on the back of it.
Yeah, clever. I mean, usually you very often when I'm giving out the Christmas leaflets, I dress as Santa, but I didn't on this occasion. And loads of people took them, but I kind of think the ones that didn't take them, with some of them, was it because they thought I might be a chugger?
Yeah, I tell you what I've always found is that if you can have long periods where you can't give anything away, but then when you do, and other people see that, then you'll get a whole run of people. Yeah,
absolutely, you dread it. You've got a line of people coming up to you, and they're taking the leaflets, and one doesn't take the leaflet, and then you dread it because all the ones after them,
they go, oh, there's something wrong there,
and then you're praying for someone. Well, not praying, but like hoping that someone is going to take a leaflet. And then they take a leaflet, and then I mean, it goes to show how people are like kind of copy what other people do.
Oh, we are a product of our societies, but
yeah, that's
you're
right.
You're a very bad atheist if you're going around praying, Ronnie.
No, I did. That was a slip of the tongue. I told you I've told it before, but on one occasion when I was dressed as Santa giving out the Christmas leaflets, we have Mormons that patrol the town centre trying to convert people to God or Mormon or wherever it is that they believe in. Oh, they believe in God, I think. Because this one come up to me and said to me, can I talk to you about God? And I was there, I was there, you know, in my Santa outfit, you see. I said, he said, can I talk to you about God? I said, no. I said,
right place and time. Yeah.
I said, I don't believe in non-existent beings.
Like me.
Yeah, and he said to me, well, why are you dressed as one then? I thought, blimey, it's a Mormon with a sense of humour. I thought, if they get to know about him, they'll throw him out, the Mormons, for having a sense of humour. I thought it was quite good, actually. I said, I said, well, I'll tell you what, you take one of my leaflets and I'll take one of your Mormon ones, which I wasn't interested, but I thought if it means that he takes my leaflet, then all right.
Yeah, I've got a question about you in a Santa suit, Ronnie, because as far as I'm aware of the kind of stereotype and the iconic figure, I mean, Santa is a rather large, rotund individual. And
I'd be better off dressed as an elf, really, wouldn't I, to be quite honest?
Yeah.
I haven't got an elf outfit.
Oh, you see, Santa is real, so there you go.
Santa's real, Tooth Fairy's real, God's real. There we are, they're all real.
Yeah. Well, you know, when you put the tooth under the under the pillow. Is it there in the morning? No. So,
no. Well, you see, the thing is, I was thinking that, like,
conclusive proof.
It would be like, wouldn't it be really dangerous, if you had people worshipping the tooth fairy, that they'd kind of start on some kind of like, I don't know, like a jihad thing where they went around killing people for their teeth to put under the pillow. And that would be.
Yeah, there's one. You see, look at that, Ronnie.
Santa exploiter. Well, yes, Santa. Yeah, he's an animal exploiter. Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's oppressor of other animals. Really, that's very, very true. And the elves. The elves. Are the elves on a living wage? Probably not.
No, they're the ultimate proletariat, if you ask me.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's an exploiter of both other beings in various forms, isn't he, Santa? No. Yeah, so
well,
maybe I shouldn't dress as Santa.
We're knocking them down like Skittles here today.
Anyway, we're on to the.
We won't let the elves union.
No, I don't think. No, I'm sure he won't.
It's like,
they ought to rise up. There ought to be like a big rebellion of elves, and then Christmas. Well, that'd probably be the end of Christmas then, wouldn't it? Whether that would be a bad thing or I don't know.
They work for the elf service, don't they? Right. Anyway.
He comes with an elf warning, doesn't Santa?
It does. Anyway, it does. Yeah. So going back then,
going back to this,
something that happens in nature is natural.
Yes. Well, I think this once again is more used when they bring it up. They'll say, we're meant to eat meat. And they point,
and it's natural because we do.
Like it's kind of, we're carnivores, or it's natural for us to eat meat and look at.
No, but they wouldn't need to go that far, Ronnie. They just go, it's natural because we do, because anything that exists in nature is natural.
Yeah, I mean yes. I mean, and you get these
thing.
You get the ones that point at the teeth, don't they? Oh, I've got these long teeth that are really not very long.
No, but they don't need to make that argument either, Ronnie. They don't need to. All they've got to say, if you go by what Natalie said, is that well, I do it. I'm in nature, so it happens in nature.
I do it because I do it because it's natural. But you see, once again, you're back to the. Back to the same. I mean, I'd say, well, what do you mean it's natural? When you say something's natural, what do you mean by that?
Well, because it's something that happens in nature. She said
something that happens in nature, but so you just believe
that makes Donald Trump natural, but
you
also
just believe in doing that. You just believed in doing things that happen in nature. So, like, why have you got a mobile phone and why have you got a computer and why are you wearing those clothes?
More than that, though, Ronnie, it means that domestic violence is natural.
Well, yes, and also if you say, like we eat meat, like you've got teeth like lions. Well, a lion will kill the cubs of another male, don't they? If they get with a female that's got cubs from another male, then the male lion.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Ronnie, is that they don't even have to have a supplementary, an add-on to that, because they've already got the reason, which is, well, it's definitely natural because I do it. I'm in nature, so that makes it natural because something that happens in nature.
So say okay, but the question isn't whether it's natural, is it? Is it right or wrong? That's what we need to be talking about, and get.
Well, in fact, we're going to come on to that because she does make the point that this ultimately is about morality, and of course we're going to agree with that. So let's see if we can go ahead.
Though we have somewhat separated ourselves from the natural world, we can see that our ancestors in nature did eat animals. In fact, they drove most megafauna toward extinction in order to feast on their corpses. If vegans want to argue that the meat industry today is unnatural, I completely agree. Animals are artificially bred, genetically modified, confined, and slaughtered by giant machines at a fraction of their natural lifespan. There is nothing about industrial animal agriculture that resembles anything close to what we would see in nature. However, that's not the argument vegans typically make. They'll come in with sources about how we're herbivores, and the point I'm making is that it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether we're omnivores, herbivores, or frugivores when you're talking about morality. And since most people consider us omnivorous, getting into biology is a waste of time. Just debunk the appeal to nature and move on. Don't roll around in the mud trying to use biology to justify your decision making. This sounds
Yeah, I agree with that. And of course, you know, I've
Well,
pointed out to people.
it doesn't matter about the argument that if they say we're carnivores, it doesn't matter. You don't need to respond to that.
Well. The thing is, I mean, biologically, we're omnivores. In fact,
no, she said that doesn't matter.
It kind of if someone says, "Oh, we're carnivores," and then so I'd say, "Well, you eat nothing but meat, then, do you, like a carnivore?" And of course, that's not true. You know, everyone eats some vegetables.
Well, it's not entirely true of obligate carnivores either, but I get the point.
Yeah, but they eat you know, they'll eat diet that's like obtained from the killing of other animals, pretty much, isn't it? You know, where the vegetable matter they tend to consume is from those other animals' stomachs.
Stomachs, yeah, that's right.
No, but so I think,
second-hand
so you
vegetables.
don't eat any vegetables then? Oh, yeah, well then you're not a carnivore, then, really, are you? You know, so what's that? And the thing about the teeth, I mean, look at the size of a gorilla's teeth. They're massive, aren't they? They live on the plant diet, so it's got nothing to do with the size of the teeth. Because you get people come and point at the teeth, don't they? I've had people point at the teeth, and that's all they've done. They've not said anything, just pointed at the teeth.
Well, we had somebody shout in Dublin, "I've got teeth."
Well, come a bit closer, and you might not have them for very much longer. I'd be very tempted to say.
And somebody else shouted, "I don't eat trees."
I know, it's mad. Well, like someone shouted, we were doing a stall, and it was in the foyer of Tesco, actually promoting the, you know, vegan friendly products they sold there. And a guy come out and he just shouted B12 and walked off. So
that was his favourite band, wasn't it, from the 80s?
He shouted UB40 or whatever. Yeah.
You too.
Perhaps he just went round shouting the names of vitamins randomly.
Yeah.
But,
vitamin K, that's a rare one. Okay,
yes.
let's do this. There's two more. So I've got a bit of a confession about this one.
Sounds nice, and there is some evidence that we can absorb cortisol from animals that are stressed. But other than that, we need to steer clear of spiritual claims. If you say that someone can absorb the animal's stress, they can turn around and say they can absorb the animal's strength. They can even say it's karma the cow was killed because they could be a reincarnated serial killer.
I believe in that whole entire karma reincarnation, and like, what if that's some piece of shit serial killer that's reincarnated in a cow, and that's the way that he deserves to be? And like,
now I want to just stop there because that's a bit weird to me. Because if you believe in reincarnation, the idea is that you get reincarnated in order to learn things, isn't it? Not to be oppressed.
Well, yes. And if you want to be reincarnated as so-called higher being, then the last thing you want to do is you know, live on a diet that it involves killing other beings, isn't it? Because that's not going to help in your reincarnation process, is it? If you believe in that.
Yeah, I just thought that was a bit weird, to be honest.
We want to keep our arguments grounded in reality, and using these spiritual arguments makes vegans seem out of touch. Veganism already has a hippie, crunchy granola image.
Right. Hippie, crunchy, vanilla image, Ronnie.
Vanilla?
I think that's what she said, but she definitely said hippie and crunchy.
Hippie and crunchy? I don't know. Hippies crunchy? They probably are.
I think she meant grungy, didn't she?
Grungy, probably hippie and grungy. Well, you see, I don't like it. To me, you know, veganism is a philosophy of animal liberation, right? That's what it's about. I don't like it when other things are associated with veganism that are nothing to do with veganism, and you get like you get stuff like, you know, you have people at vegan fairs selling stuff like, oh, you know, I've got this CD and it's all about the angels and that, and they think, well, what's that doing at a vegan fair? That is absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with veganism. And I think it's unfortunate that kind of all these kind of weird, strange beliefs have become associated with veganism because they're nothing to do with it. They're not connected, and somehow this kind of connection has been made that doesn't exist.
She said crunch granola. Is that a joke, or is that what you actually thought? Or crunch. I think she said crunchy peanut butter. I think so.
Crunch granola. I think there is crunch granola, isn't it? But you know, I mean, in crunch granola, I think crunch granola is probably all right. You know.
Yeah, I think I've got some in
yeah. I've had it before, but you see what I mean? That like it's kind of. It isn't anything to do. It's really a very, very simple and straightforward thing. It's that you know, animals should, you know, other animals should not be oppressed by, you know, by in fact, you know, that there should be no, you know, no sentient being should be oppressed by another or exploited by another. You know, that's really what kind of in its broad sense veganism about, isn't it? It's not about, you know, and why are these all these weird and wonderful things being associated with veganism when it isn't about any of that?
What's that oil that Aspie is peddling? DB thing, or I don't know what it is.
Oh, there's a thing that comes from cannabis, isn't it? That's meant to have like, but
I think
that's
it's
nothing to do with
expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nothing to do with veganism. It's nothing to do with vegans. Yeah, it might be a product suitable for vegans. It doesn't contain animal products, but it's not anything to do with like the philosophy of it.
Yeah,
you know, and like kind of we've got like, oh, I mean, it can be like really depressing looking on Facebook about all the weird things that some vegans believe. And I think, well, that's nothing to do with veganism. What, you know, what's going on? You know, and which is why I tend not to look on Facebook very much, apart from just posting stuff on there and getting off. You know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Actually, some of the founders said some pretty kind of spiritual things, if we're honest about it. But it was the letters pages of the vegan, which was kind of, as it were, worse. Now, so this is Beavis and Butthead, isn't it? Here in the picture.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it.
And they've got I'm RPAT. So that's bound to be rude, isn't it? I don't know what that's supposed to be, but it's bound to be rude. Anyway, let's continue because I think I'm going to stop it any second now.
Yeah.
And playing into that harms our message. It's also too focused on the human. You're saying harming animals is wrong because it harms the human? Really? That's not why we fight for animal rights. We fight against animal abuse because it harms.
Right, I wanted to stop there because I got tripped up by the language here. She kind of goes, this has got nothing to do with animal rights. We fight against animal abuse because, and I was thinking, well, there you go. This is the modern day thing where you immediately switch from animal rights into animal welfare by switching the language. So you talk about animal rights and then you immediately switch to a welfare concept like abuse. And I wish that vegans wouldn't do that. I mean, it's not as bad as the cruelty language all the time, but it's still RSPCA language. If you talk about animal cruelty, you talk about animal abuse, you're using RSPCA language and you're trying to slap a vegan label on it. And that's what's confusing to people.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer exploitation and oppression to abuse because that covers all of it. I think the word abuse means different things to different people, and that's the problem, that it's likely to be sort of misinterpreted. Really, rather like cruelty. I agree with you; it's not as bad as cruelty, but it's similar in that it can be different people put different meanings to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the most popular chants is "There's no excuse for animal abuse." Well, everybody would agree with that. The RSPCA, everybody that you're passing on the street, if it's on a surge march or something, everybody would agree with that. But the fact is, the culture doesn't see abuse in the way that vegans see it. But we're going to come on to that a little later. Let's just finish this one, and then I think we've got one to do, I think.
Harms the animals, not because it makes humans sad. There are many vegan cults which use this idea of animal products as being impure to promote their religious message. Veganism is already considered a weird cult by many people, and using spiritual claims propagates this myth. Veganism rests on the idea that animals are sentient and we don't need to eat them, so let's leave it at that. I know.
I was a bit trigger happy on the thing there. So my confession is that I used to use a version of this argument but it was only kind of I used to say, I tend to have a feeling that if you metabolize, products of violence 3 times a day, it can't really be good for you, because you're taking that violence in, But it was a good kind of like conversation starter, in the sense that, oh, yeah, really, and all that. But then you could go, and then you can then say, yeah, but really, that's a welfare point anywhere, because it wouldn't matter morally. And so, yeah, I kind of semi-use that type of. I mean, I don't do it anymore, but I used to. In fact, I've got a radio interview where the guy goes, "Do you really believe that?" And I said, well, I got the feeling that it can't be good to digest violence all day. And I think, to put it that way, it's kind of true, isn't it? That you can't. Surely that can't be that great.
Well, it's certainly not good for the animals that the violence has been caused to, that you're digesting them as, contributed to. Is it in that sense? No.
No. Yeah. So yeah, I was probably wrong to kind of make that point. Now we got to the end, and this is the one where everybody who knows me are going to know that I'm fairly kind of happy with this one.
Yeah.
Let's see what we make of it.
Oh, it's really hypocritical for me to hate on this argument, because I've used it so many times and continue to use it when I advocate to university students. But the more I interact with this line of thinking, the less I like it, and here is why. Well, I don't think I really loved animals before I went vegan. I know many meat eaters who...
No, she said, I don't think I loved animals before I went vegan. As though by going vegan, she now loves animals.
I think the problem with the word love is that there's so many meanings to it. And so you may be talking about one meaning of the word love, and somebody else may take it as being another meaning, and that's why it's not really a very good word to use.
What do you think? What do you think people mean by it then, Ronnie?
Well, I think most people who describe themselves as animal lovers are people that like their dogs and their cats, and they'll look at the lambs in the field and go, "Oh, aren't they lovely?" And then now the next minute they're chomping down on their beef burger or their piece of chicken or something like that.
But this phrase is used throughout society. I'm a music lover. I'm a football lover, right? And so,
yes,
what do you think people think when they say that kind of stuff?
I think it pretty much equates with pet lover. To be quite honest, I mean, it was really odd that I remember we were doing a stall, an outreach stall at a dog rescue fundraising event, and there was a guy who was the compere of this event, and he said, "I love coming along. I give my services free to compare these events and to introduce the various, what's going on." He said,
so he meant enjoy then. Enjoy, doesn't he? There, I enjoy coming along.
I enjoy, he said, because I'm a big dog lover. He said, in fact, I'm a big animal lover. He said, I love all animals. Right. And then he's chuntering along. 20 minutes later, he says, "Oh, what a lovely smell. Where's that coming from?" "Oh, it's coming from the burger van over there. Yes, I'm going to have myself a burger in a minute."
Because I love burgers.
And this was 20 minutes after he'd said he loved all animals. So in what sense did he love all animals that he was like prepared to eat another animal? It certainly wasn't in the sense of where love means respect. It's in a different meaning of that word, isn't it? Do you see what I mean?
This is definitely a cultural issue here, because when they say I'm an animal lover, they don't mean cows and pigs and chickens. In fact, in my PhD, I covered that because I put a call out to say, what interactions have you had with members of the public? And this woman, it's one of the appendix of my PhD. They said that these a group of teenagers came around, teenage girls, young women, and they were saying that they were animal lovers and all this kind of stuff. And then so the woman said, "Oh, so you're a vegetarian or a vegan?" And they said, "Oh no, but we love animals," and everything. Transpired that they didn't think that the ones they ate were animals. and she said, you know, that's not as unusual as you think. And then within a couple of weeks, I think Julie Burchill, writing in The Guardian, said that she was an animal lover. And she said, of course, when I say that, I don't mean the ones I mean the cats and the dogs and everything.
Yeah.
And so that the cultural meaning of I am an animal lover is I'm a dog lover, cat lover, horse lover.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say, I think that kind of people's the relationship people have with the animals they say they love can be used to educate, stroke, persuade, encourage them to look at the animals they eat differently. In other words, what happens when someone has an animal in their home, a dog or a cat, or even if someone who's got a horse, they see those animals. They get to see those animals as individuals. These are individual animals. And so if we can get them to realize and to see that the animals that they are actually consuming are all individuals as well in the same way, then I think that we can get somewhere. And that's where I think you kind of try to make that comparison. That's kind of not really, that isn't really to do with love. It's to do with their treatment of that animal, their consideration of that animal as an individual.
I think there's one slight kind of thing that kind of derails that, which is the fact that, I mean, I've known vivisectors who experiment on cats saying that they love their cat at home. And so it's not that they don't necessarily see each as individuals, although they would more likely to put a number on the laboratory one, but it's not as though it's like a farm where they're dealing with thousands of individuals or units, that kind of thing. But that's another cultural thing, is the fact that we've got this very functional society. And people say to vegans, well, what are other animals for? Well, what are they for? If you didn't do that, what would you use them for? What are they for? Because they've got this functional attitude, even down to the non-human world, that antelopes are for lions, which isn't true, right? Antelopes happen to be preyed upon by lions, but that's not what they're for.
No. But I mean, I don't think it's something to work with everyone. I think if someone is, I mean, most people couldn't be a vivisector, although they'd be quite happy probably to pay a vivisector to kind of provide the products of vivisection. And so it's not something that would work with everyone, but I think it is a kind of way of getting people to see that, what do you consider the difference to be between, the dog you've got at home that you care so much about and the animal you eat? How do you see them differently as individuals? And that you're kind of asking people those questions.
I think it's true. I think that's one element of it. I think it can be derailed by the kind of functional thing. But Reagan said that. He said, I came to the realization that if you were to think, if I knew you, I wouldn't eat you. And it's as simple as that, he said. If I knew you, I wouldn't eat you.
Yeah.
In other words, if I knew you as an individual with a name, which is all the difference that people need in terms of their animal companions. They give them names and they see them as individuals, and therefore they start to think that they have personalities or recognize the personalities that they have rather than think. And so therefore they have a much richer understanding of who they're dealing with than these beings who they only ever meet in a restaurant or on a shelf in a supermarket.
Yeah, and I think it's like, I mean, going back to the word love. I mean, as I said, I think the danger of it is of course, and it's similar to cruelty in a way, in that different people think that when Natalie said I only got to love all animals when I became vegan, she's probably talking about love as a kind of another word for respect. In a sense.
Yeah.
And so in that case,
it's a very plastic word then, isn't it?
Yes. In that case, for her, that kind of would be true. But most people don't, in terms of other animals, don't put that actual meaning with it.
The only thing I would ask Natalie is, why didn't you therefore, if we think that you meant respect, why didn't you say respect?
Yes.
Because it doesn't help when you use this plastic amorphous abstract word.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? So anyway, let's continue, shall we?
Who love animals more than any vegan I've ever met. I had this one friend who couldn't walk down the street without saying hi to every dog. She spent her free time volunteering and dog and cat rescues, and you could say, oh, she only cared about pets, but she was always watching videos of cute animals and talking about how much she loved them. It was really clear to me that she did love animals deeply, and she also
I don't buy that. I don't buy the fact that you also like cute chicks. It moves you much away from a pet mentality, do you?
No, because you see them in a way that's completely divorced from the animals that you're eating, and they're not so cute, chicken that you buy from a supermarket.
Yeah, it'd be like going to these, these little kind of farm things, these what they call, farm
petting farms, aren't they?
Petting zoos and all that.
Petting
shite.
zoo, yeah.
Be one of those, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
also ate meat. The reason she ate meat was because she liked the taste and she was so disconnected from the process and didn't even really think about how it had come from a living, breathing animal. I also dislike this argument because of other arguments I've disliked in this video. It focuses too much on the meat eaters and not on the animals. Being vegan has nothing to do with loving animals. It has to do with justice. I know plenty of vegans who don't love animals, but they still don't think they should be tortured for a sandwich. We need to point out to meat eaters that animals deserve rights, whether they care about them or not. Chickens don't deserve rights because some people might love them. They deserve rights because they're conscious and cognitive.
Right, she said that 3 times. So I'm bound to stop that. Animals deserve rights. So that's not an animal rights understanding.
No,
the animal rights understanding is they have rights, and that brings back to this concept of respect. They have rights which are disrespected, not that they don't have them.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, they have rights already.
Now, of course, you could have been talking about legal rights, but
yes, but not necessarily. I mean, there are a lot of people that kind of have this attitude that animals don't have rights until humans give them those rights, not necessarily legally, but just in
like their gifts or something. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Debbie's saying of that person's friend, Natalie's friend, I bet she doesn't love snakes. So
yeah, probably not. No, or probably not fishes either, because they're not cute and cuddly, are they?
Yeah. Hey, John's come up with a great idea. There's a new campaign for a new welfare group that we know about, to introduce a xylophone per bird.
Well, you need to put
they could petition the RSPCA to get it sorted out.
Get the xylophones in the cages with them, and then they'll be happy.
Yeah, maybe the RSPCA could sort that out for them.
Well, you never know. That could be a new campaign.
Individuals who have a vested interest in not being tortured. Whether meat eaters love them or not is irrelevant. I also think it's unfair to tell someone how they feel. If there's one thing we can't argue against, it's another person's feelings. A couple months ago, a vegan asked me if this argument is just an ad hominem, and I kind of think that it is. As vegans, we hate ad hominems. I hate when someone tells me they can eat meat because I have a cell phone. So we shouldn't be using ad hominems if we don't want them to be used. All this being said, I do know a few people who went vegan because someone told them that they can't love animals and eat them too. So this is another case of an argument that I personally don't find logical, but appears to be effective. I hope this video didn't piss too many people off, and if it did, let me know why in the comments.
Right, we're finished. So
yeah, I mean, I know people who've become vegan where they kind of started off in a sort of rescue, maybe dog and cat rescue and stuff, and kind of through that, kind of met vegans and became vegan that way. That it was kind of a way that, and that's something that kind of has happened with single issue campaigns, isn't it? Where people who aren't vegan are involved in these things. Like one very famous one was a live export campaign, wasn't it? Where people would go to protest against animals being exported from the UK to Europe
with their ham
and
sandwiches, yeah.
standing there with a placard eating a ham sandwich. Yeah. But because vegans were involved in that campaign and those people rubbed shoulders with vegans, it kind of, a lot of people went vegan because of being involved in that. So it kind of can happen that way. People can go from just caring about certain animals to kind of respecting all of it. That all of them. That kind of can happen. It can be a kind of gateway to that.
Yeah, well, I think the argument there is that there's loads of gateways. There's loads of people. I mean, Danny talks about this, Grumpy Vegan Grandad. A lot of people come in for the health thing, but so long as they kind of, at some point meet the ethical argument, that's the crucial thing. And,
Yes.
and the evidence seems to be that the earlier the better, and also in a kind of form that they can understand, I suppose, and then just something that they can further explore. So this is kind of like movement reflexivity, that people come in and then they get a wider vision of which is why it's frustrating for me that a lot of relatively new vegans don't like the wider vision of veganism that there is. They actually like it to be limited, which is this kind of stay in your lane type argument.
I kind of think it's kind of similar with those people. Is what you're kind of doing in a sense in outreach is you can take a view that someone already holds and kind of show them or explain to them of why that view is inconsistent with them not being vegan. And it's kind of a bit the same with these vegans that have a very limited view of veganism. You can kind of show them how their view of what veganism actually is that they currently hold is inconsistent with the broader view of veganism. So it's a similar. You're kind of doing a type of, I call it inreach. There's outreach to people who aren't vegan. There's inreach to people who kind of are vegan, who consider themselves vegan, in order to educate those people about what veganism really means and what the scope of veganism really is.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Some people would rather limit the scope because then they can get more people on board, because they don't want to necessarily talk much about, say, vegan values as we might understand them. Because then the idea of loving animals and coming together on that basis is a lot more comfortable for them, because there's going to be loads of people who will declare that they love other animals, and you say, okay, well, therefore, you've got vegan values. Whereas if somebody said that to us, we go, well, veganism is rather more than that, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But where's it going to end up? Is a movement like that just going to go down to the lowest common denominator, where it becomes perhaps at best just reducitarian? If people are included that kind of don't really have true vegan values, because you want the maximum number of vegans, just say, well, like anyone that eats potatoes is a vegan, and then we'll have loads of vegans then, won't we?
Or all the people who don't punch cows in the face.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So when people talk about this thing like gatekeeping, well, everyone that considers themselves a vegan is a gatekeeper, because for all of us, there are people that if that person said that they were a vegan, we would turn around and go, "Oh no, you're not."
Yeah, we just can't really have veganism meaning anything and everything.
No, and really, if we're going to look at, well, okay, so what are the principles that have to be applied in determining what veganism is and whether or not someone's a vegan? To me, the only rational way of doing that, you've got to go back to what the founders of veganism said or what they intended. That's the only way of doing it. There is no other way really of determining what veganism is. And all right, I know that what the founders of the vegan movement kind of said is open. It's a little bit like the Bible, isn't it? People interpret it in different ways.
You're a terrible atheist, Ronnie.
Yeah. Well, well, people do interpret the, even though I don't believe in the Bible, it's true. People interpret it in different ways. They find whatever they want in the Bible, don't they? It justify everything, really. And I think, you know, there are people that interpret what the, you know, founders of the vegan movement said in different ways. But at least they're going back to that. At least they're kind of going back to look at that to determine what veganism is or what veganism should be.
Yeah,
Because
well,
it's the only way
my
of doing it.
caveat to that is
Yeah.
that people shouldn't be afraid of what the founders said, but also
No.
they shouldn't think that all of this is set in stone, because things move on, and that's one of the characteristics of a social movement. It moves, and so yeah,
I think the language that that was used back in the day, you know, like in the kind of 40s and 50s, we use a very different language to describe things and talk about things now. And I think that's, you know, that's the way in which kind of we'd need to change how we describe veganism, for instance.
yeah. I mean, obviously that would be sexist language and all that. I mean, ironically, in terms of some fundamentals, I mean, people like Leslie Cross did talk about rights. They probably wouldn't have talked about rights in the Tom Reagan kind of sense. But then again, nobody in the modern movement talks about rights in the Tom Reagan sense anyway. And so they were kind of well ahead of most people. And I would say the founders, although you know, no words are banned, they would have talked about animal cruelty a lot less than modern day vegans do, because they actually said it's about liberation, not welfare. Whereas we've got a heck of a lot of new welfarists, in Francion's terms, in the modern movement, who are quite happy to use welfare language and slap a vegan label on it, and then they think that it's the problem of the people listening to the argument to sort that out. Whereas actually, what it means culturally is that we've got a lot more to do in terms of explaining why is it that you need to slap the word vegan on it. You know, don't be cruel, therefore go vegan is culturally incoherent. So we've got to explain what vegans mean by trying to link those two ideas, right? If we do, it'd be better not to try to link those two ideas and talk about animal rights right from the start. We kind of make our job more difficult for ourselves by trying to warp and transmute welfare language and make it kind of like try and squeeze it into veganism.
Yeah, we have to have, you know, have to use words in the sense that the people we're talking to understand them, rather than in the sense that we might understand them as well, which is kind of, you know, like, and cruelty is an example of a word that kind of falls into that
Yeah,
category.
but that's an interesting point, because it pointed out to me that with all this stuff that's going on in Palestine, a lot of people have shown that they understand ideas like, you know, genocide, oppression, these kind of ideas, things that some people say, oh no, that'll lose them. You know, you got to talk about cruelty and you've got to talk about abuse and everything, as though these other ideas are a bit, you know, your favorite language. Some vegans would say it's too complicated for most people. I don't accept that for a second.
No, I think people do understand words like that, and you know, oppression, for instance. People understand what that is, and I think that's you know, it's an important word to use. Exploitation. You know, people understand what that is.
Yeah, I think they do. But then, of course, because we haven't made that case very often, that, you know, exploitation and oppression, that does connect to veganism. But because, you know, most modern day vegans try it the cruelty way, which is just as confusing. I mean, I would say there's more logic in using the oppression way, because there's a link there. It's got to be argued. But if you try and crowbar welfarism to veganism, I don't think it's going to work, because, well, as Andy said, people already know about welfare and cruelty, because they know what the RSPCA stand for. And so if we use RSPCA language, they think that we're welfarists. And you go, oh no, we're not welfarists. We stick a vegan label on it, as though that in itself will just explain everything. It doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very
Oh.
true. And well, I mean, and basically, as I said, we've part of the vegan education is actually educating people who consider themselves vegan as to what veganism kind of really is, as well
Mm.
as educating non-vegans to become vegan. There's these two, as I call out, I refer to them as outreach and inreach, and both of those are important.
Yeah, I think what Debbie says here is very important in the sense that it's like when this is linked to my argument about when people make a claim for movement unity. What that usually means is that they're asking vegans to do less than vegan stuff, and they're asking animal rights people to do animal welfare. That's the way it works, because the non-vegans won't advocate for veganism, and the welfarists won't advocate for animal rights. So Deb's right. If you're an animal rights vegan, it's down to you. So there's no point in you getting diverted down another road.
No. And I think there's a kind of myth of unity, because there's a difference between kind of talking to people in a civil and polite way, even though you kind of disagree with them. But that isn't unity. You can't have unity where what one group are doing is actually harming the aims of another group. Because if you've got people promoting welfarism, that's harming the aims of people who are promoting rights, or promoting promoting liberation, isn't it?
Well, not according to them, it isn't.
But you can explain kind of how that is the case, in that you're kind of giving people, in effect, the green light to carry on buying into the oppression of other animals, providing
they more like say these are like planting seeds, getting people to think. Some people would even say that other animals don't get any moral consideration at all. So if you can get them even to just think about it from a welfare thing, at least you've kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. So we've had a recent campaign where everybody's supposed to write to the RSPCA to get them to drop this company that was catching chickens and everything. They would see that as part of the road towards animal rights, and it comes in a kind of equation that welfare plus welfare plus welfare equals rights. Now
it doesn't. It just equals welfare.
No, but the argument of the new welfarist, again to use Francio's language, is that's what you get. You get rights at the end because you're chipping away at it and getting people to think.
But then equally, and I think much more probably, you're just going to encourage people to carry on buying into the exploitation of other animals, because they're led to believe that the condition of those animals under exploitation is somehow improved.
Yeah, like this campaign, because they've fired this chicken catching firm. People are going to assume that they've got a gentler one now or something.
Well, yes, they will, and in fact, it makes no difference whatsoever to the oppression and exploitation of chickens or hens. Wasn't egg-laying hens, I think, in this case. The only thing that's going to make a difference to that is people stop consuming animal products. And enough people are of that belief that we can somehow gain, political ascendancy, so that to do something about the ones that are determined to still carry on.
I think the argument might be, Ronnie, that if you say that, you're asking for too much. And there's been this thing ever since the 80s, when there's big arguments about one-track campaigning and this kind of stuff, that if you ask for all or nothing, you get nothing. That's what they'd say there.
Well, what you're doing, you're asking for all, and what happens? You either get all, or you get somewhere on the way to all, don't you? Because what happens is you kind of get welfare, even though you're kind of not asking for welfare and you don't want welfare, because what will happen is the industries of animal oppression will be be concerned that they're going to be boycotted, and so they'll say, "What can we do about this?" So, we bring in these welfare measures in the hope that people won't think we're so bad, and we'll continue buying our products. So you kind of get welfare, even though you don't. That's not what you asked for, and that's not what you want. That happens anyway. So you don't have to specifically ask for it, and so you're not watering down your message.
You can't get rights through the industry because they can't deliver rights in the same way as at the moment politics can't deliver rights, but it can deliver some little bans here and there or welfare reforms here and there. But I mean, if you're talking animal rights, you're talking way beyond the capability of politicians.
Yeah, but we kind of have to we sort of have to say it as it is, and I think people have got to stop being frightened of ordinary people hearing it as it is, because unless you say it as it is, people are never going to see it as it is. It's a bit like the emperor's got no clothes type of scenarios. Everyone was frightened to say that this emperor had no clothes until a little boy said it or something. You know the story. There's I don't know, there's a proverb or whatever, and it's the same. We have to talk about why speciesism is wrong. We have to talk about human supremacism and why that's wrong. We have to use that kind of language. Otherwise, people are never going to get there. People are never going to understand. People are never going to see it. But you're kind of expecting people to guess these things.
The weird thing is this was said in November 1944 by Donald Watson. Is you've got to ripen them up to your ideas. They're not just going to magically arrive at the same understanding as you.
Unless you say it, how are people? And like if we look at situations of the oppression of humans by other humans, like the slave trade and slavery. What will we think of people say? Oh, don't let's not talk about abolishing slavery. Let's just talk about improving the conditions of slaves. Let's talk about like giving them, longer chains or giving them like the occasional little walk around deck or something like that. Let's go for that. What would we think about? What would we think about that now?
Well, there are competing claims about that there were kind of slave welfarists and slave abolitionists. There are competing claims.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they were. I'm sure they were slave welfarists, and there were in fact people that kind of based their argument on economics, that the slave trade was somehow bad for the economy, because you don't mention about the slaves and that's wrong to oppress the slaves. You mention that it's harmful to the economy. But in the end, the abolition of slavery came because of concern for the actual slaves, didn't it? And that was the main thrust of it. And so, we have to be the same. We mustn't be afraid to say things as they are. Because it's the only way. The only way we're really going to achieve anything is by doing it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Andy said the slave welfarists were never slaves, though. Oh, there's a wink there. So it must
Yeah. So there we go. But I hope it's been interesting. Like,
oh, I see. Yeah, that actually is a point, isn't it? That if you're not the victim, it's like we can take in the animal movement any position we want, because the other animals can't go, "Oi, we don't like the way you're doing it."
No. That's the difference between our movement and movements that are opposed to the oppression of other humans, because those other humans can say that, can't they? And that would always be taken into account. I
think I sent you the video of this, didn't I? Where Jane Goodall is complaining that they were going to bring in a cage-free thing. What is it? End of the cage age, it was called.
The other thing to consider is a question of resources. If you talk about the animal advocacy movement as a whole, including welfarists and all that, our movement has only limited resources, and we're up against the oppressors of other animals who have huge resources in various ways, financial and otherwise. So it's really important that we use our resources as efficiently as possible. And I'd say it's a huge misuse of those resources to put them into promoting welfarism. and that what we need to do is to put those resources as much as possibly can into promoting veganism.
But,
and that is the most.
You're talking to vegans though, not welfarists, right? But
you see, the problem is that a lot of these welfarists are vegans.
Yeah, but that's the bit that's weird. That's it. If they're welfarists, you expect them to do welfare, but you don't need the vegans to slide down into welfare.
No, not at all. We need them to because that's where our resources have to be put into spreading the vegan message, and I consider it's not just the problem with welfarism for me isn't just that it's damaging the movement for the rights of other animals to be respected, that it's damaging the movement for animal liberation. Yeah, that's one problem I have with it. The other problem I have with it is it's a misuse of resources. The diverting resources down like a road that's not going to go anywhere, instead of putting it into educating people to go vegan.
It's not misusing the welfare resources, because that's all they're going to do, which is a little bit why when you've got vegans railing against the RSPCA, all they've got to do is to free their mind of that and say, well, that's the welfarists. That's not us.
You see, with a lot of these organisations that promote welfare or promote welfare, because you've got some groups they'll promote veganism and then they'll also have welfarist campaigns. Yeah, it's quite a few like that. But where is their money coming from? Their money, a lot of their finances is coming from vegans, and they're also asking vegans to engage in welfarist campaigns as well. You see,
I'm not sure if I agree with that, Ronnie, because I think that if they were able to do vegan outreach, because that's what they believe in, as it were, without doing the welfare, I think they would. It's just that I think they think they'll lose their job if they did that.
Well, I think, I mean, the financial aspect, I think, does come into it. That if you can have these kind of are able to proclaim victories, that kind of really aren't really victories, but you can make them out to be victories. Like, we stopped this supermarket getting eggs from this place, and of course they're going to get the eggs from somewhere else. It's going to make no difference, but like, we've actually stopped them getting the eggs from this place. We stopped them getting the pork from this place. That's what a brilliant victory. And so we've won a great victory. Send us loads of money, and it's kind of that, and it's kind of playing into a problem that humans have in general, which is this kind of short-termism, and kind of where humans have difficulty thinking at any kind of distance, and they see this immediately in front of them. Oh, there's been this victory.
Yeah, but we've also talked about it in terms of psychological need, haven't we, Ronnie?
Yes, but we have to overcome that. We have to overcome that and kind of find ways of the more everyone that becomes vegan is a victory, isn't it?
Yeah, I've always argued that would be one way of, if you need victories, then why not try and get those victories? But I don't think it's the same as like a factory with a closed sign on it for them. I think it's a bit too abstract, I think, for them.
Yeah, but we kind of have to use our resources much more effectively. We're up against these organizations with far greater resources certainly in terms of financial than we've got, and so we have to be much more efficient in how we operate. And
yeah, I mean, it's remarkable, really. You've got all these groups that would claim to be animal rights groups, would claim to be vegan based, would claim that all their staff are vegans, but they're always in the business of slicing up the cake and giving some of it to welfare, and that's got to be for money reasons.
Well, yes, because it's easier to win. Because in the field of welfare, it's much easier to win these so-called victories. When you analyse them, they aren't really victories at all. But because basically, what happened is you're pushing the problem around rather than solving.
But you wouldn't need to do that if your support base was vegan. So it implies that the support base isn't vegan.
No, I mean, sadly, I think that, like, kind of probably most of the support. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the support base is vegan because I think there's so much confusion amongst vegans over these things that vegans will think, brilliant, isn't it brilliant that then this supermarket's no longer
doesn't make sense though, Ronnie. If you've got all your money coming in from vegans,
yeah,
and then you then start to do non-vegan things or less than vegan things, the vegans would presumably complain about it. But there's also...
they don't. No, they don't. No, that's the thing. Don't, because there's this big confusion, and I think that there's this kind of mindset that then if something's for the animals, so to speak, then it's a good thing, and then it's great, and that we should support it.
Yeah, but there's nothing better for the animals than veganism.
Yeah, but they kind of but people, vegans, a lot of vegans don't tend to. They're kind of for some reason they don't think this that way, and I think this is another area where vegans need to be educated. Really, because I think they just tend to think, yeah, they're personally vegan. But like we've kind of always had this, haven't we? Because, way back in the day, you had like, if you go back to the 70s, 80s, 90s, before vegan outreach really began in any real way at all, we were all involved with single issue campaigns, weren't we? We were vegans and, personally vegan and believed in it all. But when we went out campaigning, it was single issues. It wasn't.
Don't remind me of those days, Ronnie. You're upset.
No, and it's kind of it's a similar thing, and that's kind of continued, into today, where someone thinks that's for the animals. That's great. I'm going to support it, right? And people don't really think. Well, hang on a minute. Are all these things that are for the animals, are they actually equal?
Yeah, but the point is, Ronnie, the very same people you're saying would say that would also say, or certainly agree, that we've got much less funds than the industries that we're fighting against.
Yes.
And
absolutely. Well, we've got much less funds. What we have got, or what we potentially have got, are the numbers. And kind of this is another kind of huge problem within the vegan community, that is the massive number of vegans that are actively going out there and promoting veganism. Because if they did, we'd have overwhelming numbers of advocates for veganism, and despite the fact that the other side's got a lot more resources in terms of money, our numbers would overcome that in terms of the information we can spread.
If you locate our numbers, where are they going to be? In the grassroots, or are they going to be members of the national groups? They're going to be in the national groups.
Well, I think in terms of people who are vegan, I think they're just kind of ordinary folks who are vegan. I think some of them might be members of those organisations, but these particular organisations are actually run by only small numbers of people. Others may be members or supporters of them.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it could be that, and we're back to where we started with the fact that those people probably adhere to the idea that by and large veganism is a diet. Probably, the ones who are not a member of anything.
I think some do and some don't, and once again, it's a case for education within the vegan community. Where someone thinks that veganism is only a diet. It's kind of up to us to educate them about what veganism really is.
The frustrating thing then is that if the big voices are saying diet and we're saying it's not a diet, that's the problem there. The big voices are louder.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem, but what do we do? All we can do is carry on doing what we're doing, isn't it? And that's the same with outreach. All we can do is, it is tragic that so few I find it tragic that so few other vegans are involved in outreach, but that's not going to stop me doing outreach. And the fact that there are very loud voices proclaiming veganism to be less than what it isn't going to stop me, trying to educate people as to what it actually really is. And that's all we can do. All we can do is just keep going with that.
Well, we're coming up to 2 hours, but to bring it round full circle, I think the answer to this is what a vegan. They're kind of like coordinated, aren't they?
Well, I think what Veganuary are doing is basically it's kind of very internet based campaign, and they've got loads of resources on their website, and plus they send out people, you know, send meal plans out to people, and they do different things like that. So that's what they do. You know, Veganuary is very internet based.
And have they still got mentors and all that?
I think they've got all of that, yeah. And I think what you're doing with the leaflets is just
just putting people in front of them
in touch with Veganuary.
Yeah. So is it are the mentors paid then? You know,
I honestly don't really know, to be quite honest. How many people they pay and how many people are volunteers in the whole setup. But you see, that's the thing, is that if those leaflets weren't distributed, then there's loads of people there that wouldn't necessarily know about Veganuary. They're not necessarily going to find out about Veganuary. They're not going to
so it'd
necessarily
be in
come
their
across
interest
online.
to give them to you then, wouldn't it? If they presumably they can't afford that.
I just think that, you see, their focus has always been very much an online focus. I mean, it's very much the way that.
Yeah, but Ronnie, you've got to get people in front of them. That's what the leaflets are for.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what the leaflets are for. But I think what Veganuary kind of hope in, because they don't really promote the leaflets, you see, and I think that's a problem. I asked them about the leaflets. I mean, we've had artwork from them before and stuff like that, so I knew they had them, but you wouldn't know they had them. You wouldn't, by going on the website, you wouldn't know that there's the artwork for leaflets available at all.
So I think it's media coverage that gets
because I think they're very focused on online media stuff, and all that kind of stuff. It's always been an online.
Yeah, I mean, it could be fair. I mean, they might just say, well, leaflets don't work. What you need is to get on Good Morning Britain or whatever, right? That's what.
Well, the thing is, they obviously do think leaflets work because they've taken the trouble to produce the artwork.
Yeah, but it's not a major plank of it, is it?
It's not it's not a major plank in terms of kind of like what they're into.
Well, if you're saying they're not even promoting them, I mean, they're obviously not that bothered about them either, are they?
No, because I think their focus is very much on online stuff. But then you get that you get that in other areas of the movement as well, don't you? Where people operate exclusively online, and you know, they try to spread the vegan message online, and they don't really operate very much in the outside world at all. There's quite a lot of people like that, and they obviously think that, like, whether it's because they don't think operating in the outside world does any good. I think it's probably not that. I think it's probably that you know, just being online is what they're into, and maybe that's what Veganuary's attitude is. I mean, they're very pleased that people are getting the leaflets done. And one thing I was disappointed with was there was a woman in Brazil wanted some leaflets, and she said, "Oh, if you send me the leaflet that's in English, I'll translate it into Portuguese." And I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'll ask Veganuary if they've got any leaflets in Portuguese. And they haven't. They haven't translated it themselves to Portuguese, which really they should have done. It should be available in a lot of different languages, really. And it's not, because I don't think they're.
Well, again, it just points that they're not that tuned into leaflets.
But then a lot of people aren't tuned in. Like, you know, there's lots of people like in the vegan movement think it's like really weird that I go around door dropping leaflets. They say, "What are you doing that for? You know, why aren't you showing people something on a computer screen?" Because that's kind of what they're, you know, that's kind of what they're kind of into. If you see what I mean. And because I think that, you know, I'm from a time when, you know, there weren't any of those, you know.
You're just an old-fashioned stick in the mud.
I'm just an old-fashioned one that likes to, you know, use printed materials. But that doesn't mean that printed materials don't work. I don't go around saying, "Oh, those videos don't work," and no one's become vegan because of anything on the internet. Of course they have. But I think we need all manner of approaches. And there's a hell of a lot of people that will learn about Veganuary through those leaflets that otherwise wouldn't have known about it. because they've had a leaflet through their door. They otherwise wouldn't have even, known about
I
veganism.
think I've asked you this question before. I think probably a good year ago, probably if not two. Is that would Veganuary give you feedback that there's been a lot of people signing up from your area that you then can kind of extrapolate is from your leafleting?
Well, they possibly might do. They possibly might, but where that becomes difficult is now that lots of other people are having the same leaflets printed from all over the place. It would be if it was only our area that was doing it, then it'd be easier. But now,
No, but it'd be only your area that you're asking about.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you could. Yes, you could find. You'd find out from our area. You wouldn't necessarily know about other. Although we do other things. See, we do online advertising for Veganuary as well. We've just done an advert for Christmas, actually, getting people to go vegan at Christmas.
In a local paper?
No, on social media.
All right. Okay.
You can place adverts. You can. We make video ads, and you can configure it when you're placing an ad on Facebook and Instagram, which is where we do it. You can configure it to just target a local area. So it's just targeting the local area, and so your money that you spend, because you have to spend money, is just spent targeting the local area. You see, so that you kind of, I mean, you could just target anywhere, but because we're, obviously, my view is that, I want to see people really, if all vegans focused on educating people to go vegan in their local area, we'd really be flying.
But that's what I mean, Ronnie. Given that's your focus and it's been your focus for a long time, it just still seems a little bit weird that you're so focused on Veganuary.
Well, it's not that we're so focused on Veganuary. We have various campaigns throughout the year. I mean, Easter we have a campaign regarding chicks and Easter lambs and things like that. At Christmas we have a Christmas campaign. We have and Veganuary is just one of the campaigns that we do.
See, what I've done with Veganuary over the years is just use it as a means of trying to get some press coverage for the VIP more than anything.
Yeah, I think use it in kind of whatever way you can. It's just one of those things you can use. It's like World Vegan Day and World Vegan Month. That's another thing you can use. There's a World Plant Milk Day or something that I know we did a video for that one year. For instance, there's all these different things through the year that you can kind of attach things
World
onto.
Avocado Day, probably.
There's,
Ronnie, we're out of time, so
we need to
the final statement from you. Go on.
Final statement. Well, my final statement is always the same, and that is that anyone listening to this is, I mean, almost everyone listening to this is going to be vegan, aren't they? Because of where it's shared.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, and I'd say that it's really important that we spread the vegan message. And if you're not involved in outreach, then do get involved in outreach and in spreading the message in your local area. Try to encourage other local vegans to do the same, because ultimately that's the I think the most important way forward.
And if you want to hear that message again, people, you can watch any Still Alive in the archives.
We'll watch any video I've ever done. I don't know why I do lots of different. I just do the same one and just keep playing it over and over again.
Repost it.
But I think an important message really can't be said too much.
Well, important messages are said.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And I don't know whether we're. I think we may well be back next week. What do you reckon? Well, people need to
we'll see. It depends if there's been any news, I suppose, because it'll be our news one, won't it? So
yes, I mean there kind of has been something really big and very controversial that's been announced today, and that is Animal Rising's latest campaign that's caused really quite a stir. I think they had a meeting about what was the best way they could piss off the animal rights movement, and then decided to do that.
Oh, right. Well, that's complete news to me. So, yeah. All
Although
right.
we
Well,
may talk about that.
we're probably going to be doing that then because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, and anyone that's kind of seen the latest news
Yeah,
from Animal
I
Rights.
can't wait. Well, maybe we can do a special show tomorrow and do it that way. So,
yeah.
Okay, people, thanks ever so much for sticking with us. Sorry it's been 2 hours, but thanks again for sticking. And we shall probably see you next week then, with the sound of it. And we shall see you next week, providing, Ronnie,
we are still alive.